My son waited until I was 300 miles away in a cabin in Lake Tahoe to stab me in the back. The text message lit up my phone screen at exactly 9 a.m. It was short, it was brutal, and it was signed by the boy I had carried on my shoulders. It read, "Dad, the board has voted. You are removed as chairman effective immediately. Do not come back to the office. We will send your personal effects by courier." I sat there on the wooden porch holding a cup of lukewarm coffee, and I did not scream. I did not throw the phone. I simply typed 2 letters. Okay. Then I put the phone down, opened my laptop, and initiated a command I wrote 20 years ago. A command called Protocol K. By the time the sun set that evening, my son would realize that he had stolen the crown, but he forgot that I still held the keys to the castle. Before I tell you how I taught my Harvard-educated son a lesson in respect, let me know which city you are tuning in from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever had to remind someone exactly who built the table they are eating at. I am Otis King, and at 72 years old, I have learned that the loudest engine is not always the most powerful one. Sometimes the most dangerous thing in the world is a silent man with a plan. The morning air at Lake Tahoe was crisp and cold. It smelled of pine needles and money. My son Dante had insisted I come here. He called it a mandatory vacation. He said, "Dad, you have been working since 1975. Take a break, go fishing. Tiffany and I will handle the quarterly review." I should have known. You do not send a lion away from the pride unless you plan to take over the territory. I looked at the text message again. The board has voted. I knew who was on that board. Men I had hired. Men I had saved from bankruptcy. And now they had sided with Dante and his wife Tiffany. They looked at my gray hair and my walking stick and they saw weakness. They looked at Dante with his MBA and his buzzwords about artificial intelligence, and they saw the future. They were wrong. I took a sip of my coffee. It was bitter, just like the memory that flooded my mind. I closed my eyes, and I was not in a luxury cabin anymore. I was back in the cab of a 1975 Mack truck parked on the side of a dirt road in Alabama. It was raining. I was 22 years old, hungry and tired. I had tried to rent a room at the motel 3 miles back, but the manager had taken one look at my black skin and pointed to a sign that said whites only. I slept in the cab that night. It was freezing. I had a shotgun on the passenger seat because back then, a black man with a truck full of valuable cargo was a target. I ate cold beans out of a can. My hands were stained with grease that no amount of scrubbing could remove. I built King Global Logistics from that cab. I drove 18 hours a day. I missed birthdays. I missed holidays. I took the loads nobody else wanted. I navigated through towns where the sheriff would pull me over just to check if I stole the truck. I did it all for Dante. I wanted him to grow up in a world where he never had to sleep in a truck. I wanted him to have the suits, the education, and the respect I had to fight for with my bare hands. And now he was using that education to fire me via text message. I looked at the lake. The water was still. Coretta, my late wife, had warned me. 2 weeks before she passed, she grabbed my hand in the hospital room. Her grip was weak, but her eyes were fierce. "Otis," she had whispered, "you love that boy too much. You give him everything, but you never let him earn anything. Ambition without struggle is just greed, Otis. Watch him. And watch that wife of his. She is hungry for things she did not build." I had brushed it off. I thought Coretta was just being protective. But Coretta was right. She was always right. I opened my laptop. It was an old ThinkPad, thick and heavy. Dante always made fun of it. He told me to get a MacBook or an iPad. He said, "Dad, you need to upgrade. You are living in the past." But this old machine had one thing his shiny tablets did not have. It had root access. I logged into the King Global mainframe. The screen blinked green. Dante and his tech team thought they controlled the company because they had the passwords to the email accounts and the bank authorizations. They thought the software that ran our fleet of 5,000 trucks was just an asset they could buy and sell. They did not know that the entire logistics network, the brain that told every truck where to go and every package where to be, was running on a proprietary license. A license owned by me, personally. I navigated to the admin panel. I saw the live map. 5,000 green dots were moving across the United States. Each dot was a truck carrying food, medicine, and supplies for companies like Amazon and Walmart. It was a symphony of motion, and Dante wanted to sell it to Apex Tech, a soulless conglomerate that wanted to replace my drivers with automated drones. I could see the user logs. Dante was currently logged in from the headquarters in Atlanta. He was probably popping champagne. He was probably telling the investors that the old dinosaur was gone and the future had arrived. I moved my cursor to a folder labeled License Management. I hesitated for a second. Just a second. If I did this, it would cost millions. It would cause chaos. It would damage the reputation I spent 50 years building. But then I looked at the phone again. Do not come back to the office. He did not even call. He did not have the courage to look me in the eye. He treated his father, the founder of the company, like a disposable employee. If I let this stand, I was not just losing a company. I was failing him as a father. A father teaches lessons, and sometimes the most important lessons are the most painful ones. I clicked on the file. A prompt appeared on the screen. Warning: revoking the master license will immediately suspend all GPS routing and dispatch capabilities. System will lock down. Are you sure? I typed in my password. It was not a random string of numbers. It was CORETTA. I pressed enter. The screen flashed red. License revoked. System lockdown initiated. On the map, the 5,000 green dots turned gray. Then one by one they stopped moving. I sat back in my chair. The silence of the lake was beautiful. But I knew that 3,000 miles away in a glass corner office in Atlanta, the silence was about to be broken by the sound of panic. I closed the laptop. I picked up my coffee. I checked my watch. It was 9:15. It would take them about 10 minutes to realize that the trucks had stopped receiving data. It would take them another 10 minutes to realize that the dispatch software was asking for a biometric key that only I possessed. And then the phone calls would start. I put my phone on silent and placed it face down on the table. I watched a hawk circle over the water hunting for fish. It was patient. It was precise. "Coretta," I whispered into the cold mountain air. "You were right. I gave him the keys to the kingdom, but I forgot to teach him how to be a king." I leaned back and closed my eyes, waiting for the first vibration of the phone against the wood. It was going to be a long day for Dante King. But for Otis King, it was finally time to go fishing. 3,000 miles away from my quiet cabin, the air in the boardroom of King Global Logistics was smelling less like pine needles and more like expensive cologne and hubris. I can picture the scene as clearly as if I were standing there. My son Dante was standing at the head of the mahogany table holding a crystal flute of vintage Dom Perignon. Beside him stood his wife Tiffany wearing a dress that cost more than my first 3 trucks combined. They were hosting the executives from Apex Tech. These were the men in black turtlenecks and rimless glasses who viewed my life work as nothing more than a data set to be harvested. They did not care about the drivers who spent weeks away from their families. They only cared about efficiency algorithms and profit margins. Dante was beaming. He had just delivered the news of my termination. He probably told them that the dinosaur was finally extinct and that the company was ready to step into the future. He raised his glass for a toast. "To the new era," he said. "To a King Global that runs on intelligence, not nostalgia." The investors clapped. They smiled the cold smiles of sharks smelling blood in the water. But at that exact moment in the operations center down the hall, the future was crashing into a wall I built 20 years ago. It started with a single red light on the master control board, then another, then 10, then 100. The operations manager, a good man named Jenkins, who I had hired out of the Navy, would have been the first to notice. He watched in horror as the massive digital map of the United States began to bleed. The green dots representing our active fleet were turning red one by one, like lights being snuffed out in a storm. In the boardroom, the toast was interrupted by the door bursting open. Jenkins ran in his face, pale and sweating. "Mr. King, we have a problem," Jenkins stammered. Dante frowned, annoyed that his moment of triumph was being tarnished by the help. "Not now, Jenkins," he snapped. "We are celebrating." "Sir, you do not understand," Jenkins said, his voice rising in panic. "The fleet. It is stopping. All of it." Dante laughed. "What do you mean stopping?" "Trucks stop, Jenkins." "That is what traffic does." "No, sir," Jenkins said. "They are shutting down. The engines are cutting out. The electronic ignitions are locking. We have 500 trucks carrying perishable goods dead on the highway. I have drivers calling in saying their dashboards are flashing a system error." The room went silent. The Apex Tech investors lowered their glasses. "What kind of error?" one of them asked. Jenkins looked at Dante. "It says license revoked. Contact administrator." Dante's face turned the color of ash. He set his glass down so hard the stem snapped. "That is impossible," Dante hissed. "We own the software. I have the admin codes." He marched out of the boardroom followed by Tiffany and the confused investors. They rushed into the command center. The scene was chaotic. Phones were ringing off the hook. Dispatchers were shouting, trying to calm down furious drivers who were stranded in the middle of interstates from Ohio to Texas. Dante shoved a dispatcher aside and started typing furiously on the master keyboard. "Override," he muttered. "System reset. Access denied" flashed on the giant screen in big block letters. He tried again. "Administrator override. Access denied." He turned to his IT director, a young kid named Kevin who looked like he was about to faint. "Fix this, Kevin," Dante screamed. "Bypass the firewall." "I cannot, sir," Kevin squeaked. "The root kernel has been locked. It is asking for a biometric key." "What biometric key?" Dante yelled. Kevin pointed to the screen. A dialog box had appeared. It simply read, "Founder authentication required. Please scan fingerprint of Otis King." The silence in the room was deafening. The only sound was the relentless ringing of the phones. One of the Apex tech investors stepped forward. He looked at the red map. He looked at the chaos. And then he looked at Dante with pure disgust. "You told us you had full control of the asset, Mr. King," he said, his voice icy. "I do," Dante stammered. "This is just a glitch. My father, he must have—" "You fired the only man who has the keys to the engine," the investor said. "That is not a glitch. That is incompetence." Dante looked at the screen. He realized in that moment that his MBA could not solve this. His fancy suit could not solve this. The only thing that could solve this was the old man he had just exiled to the mountains. He pulled his phone out of his pocket. His hands were shaking. Back at the cabin, I watched my phone on the wooden table. It buzzed. "Incoming call, Dante." I took a sip of my coffee. I let it ring. The hawk was still circling the lake. It had found a thermal current and was riding it higher and higher. The phone stopped ringing. Then it started again immediately. "Incoming call, Dante." I imagined him in that room sweating under the fluorescent lights. I imagined the investors checking their watches, calculating how much money they were losing every second those wheels were not turning. I let it ring again and again. By the 10th call, I could feel the desperation vibrating through the wood of the table. He was not calling to apologize. He was calling because he needed me to fix his mess so he could go back to firing me. He did not understand. This was not a negotiation. This was a lesson. I picked up the phone, but I did not answer it. I simply pressed the volume button on the side, silencing the ring. I watched the screen light up over and over. 11 calls, 12 calls. Then the buzzing stopped. A moment later, a text message notification appeared. It was not from Dante. It was from Tiffany. I could hear her voice in the words. Sharp, venomous, entitled. The preview on the screen read, "Old man, you are playing a dangerous game." I unlocked the phone and opened the message. "What the hell do you think you are doing?" she wrote. "Turn the system back on right now. We have perishable cargo rotting on the highway. We have Amazon Legal Online 1 threatening to sue us into oblivion. If you do not unlock this system in the next 5 minutes, I will call the police. I will tell them you are sabotaging a public company. That is corporate terrorism, Otis. Do you want to spend your retirement in a federal prison cell?" I read the message twice. She threatened me. She threatened the man who built the roof over her head. She threatened the man who paid for her wedding. She thought fear would work on me. She thought the threat of prison would make me scramble to my laptop and beg for forgiveness. She did not know that I had faced down union busters in the 80s. She did not know I had stared down racists with shotguns in the 70s. A spoiled girl with a smartphone was not a threat. She was a nuisance. I looked at the lake. The sun was reflecting off the water blindingly bright. I typed a reply. I did not type it to Tiffany. I typed it to the general manager of the power company that supplied electricity to our headquarters in Atlanta. He was an old friend of mine. We played poker on Thursdays. "Hey, Bill," I typed. "I think there might be a safety issue with the transformer at the King Global building. You might want to cut the power for a safety inspection, just to be sure." I hit send. Then I looked back at Tiffany's message. "Turn it back on," she had said. I smiled. I turned my phone off completely. I stood up and stretched. My back popped. It was a good sound. I walked down the steps of the porch toward the water. I had a fishing pole to rig. Behind me, 3,000 miles away, the lights in the King Global headquarters flickered once, twice, and then went black. The engine was silent. The office was dark, and the King was going fishing. The sun was barely up over the Atlanta skyline, but I knew that inside the glass walls of King Global Logistics, the day had already turned into a nightmare. I drove my 1990 Ford pickup down the interstate doing 55 miles an hour in the slow lane. My phone was sitting on the passenger seat, vibrating against the cracked leather upholstery. It was buzzing so constantly it sounded like a trapped hornet. 55 missed calls. I glanced at the screen. Dante King. Dante King. Dante King. Between the calls came the text messages. They were popping up in rapid succession. Dad, pick up. Amazon is threatening to trigger the penalty clause. Walmart just pulled their contract. We are losing $10,000 a minute. Pick up the phone right now. I smiled. I did not smile because I enjoyed the destruction of my company. I smiled because for the first time in his life, my son was learning the difference between price and value. He knew the price of everything, the software, the trucks, the contracts, but he had no idea about the value of the man who kept it all running. I drove past the exit for the corporate headquarters. I could see the building in the distance towering over the highway. It looked impressive. It looked powerful. But right now it was nothing more than a very expensive paperweight. I did not take the exit. I kept driving. I was not going to the office. I was going to the heart of the company. I pulled into the gravel parking lot of a diner called the Rusty Spoon. It was a small, greasy building on the outskirts of the industrial district. The paint was peeling and the neon sign flickered even in the daylight. To Dante and his wife Tiffany, this place was a dump. To me, it was the boardroom. This was where the drivers ate. This was where the men and women who actually moved the freight gathered to complain about dispatch, to drink black coffee, and to talk about their families. I parked my truck between two massive 18-wheelers. The engines of the big rigs were silent. Usually at this hour they would be idling, ready to hit the road. Today they sat cold and heavy like sleeping giants. I walked inside. The smell of bacon grease and old cigarettes hit me. It was the smell of honest work. The diner was packed. There were 50 drivers inside, sitting in booths and on bar stools. They were big men with calloused hands and weary eyes. They were women who could change a tire in a snowstorm. When I walked in, the noise of the conversation died down. Heads turned. Forks stopped halfway to mouths. Sitting in the back booth was Big Mike. Mike was the head of the drivers' union. He was 6 feet 5 inches of solid muscle, a former linebacker who had been driving for me for 30 years. He wore a faded King Global cap and a look of grim satisfaction. I walked over to his booth. My cane tapped a steady rhythm on the linoleum floor. "Morning, Mike," I said, sliding into the booth opposite him. "Morning, Mr. King," Mike said. He did not get up. He did not need to. Mutual respect does not require ceremony. "You look tired, Mike," I said, signaling the waitress for a coffee. "Hard to sleep when the dispatch system is down," Mike said, taking a sip of his coffee. His eyes twinkled. "Strange thing, Mr. King. The tablets in the trucks just went black. Says something about a license revocation. Is that so?" I asked, playing along. "Sounds like a serious technical glitch." Mike nodded slowly. "Very serious. The young guys in the office, the ones in the skinny suits, they tried to call us on our personal cells. They told us to drive anyway. They said just get on the road and use Google Maps." "And what did you tell them, Mike?" Mike leaned forward. His voice dropped to a rumble. "I told them that without the certified manifest and the insurance codes which are locked inside that software, we cannot legally move an inch. I told them we are union drivers, Mr. King. We follow safety protocols. We do not drive blind." I looked around the room. 50 drivers, 50 trucks parked outside, and across the country 4,500 more were doing the exact same thing. Dante thought he could replace me with an algorithm. He thought the drivers were just gears in a machine. He did not realize that loyalty is the fuel that runs this engine. These men and women did not work for an app. They worked for Otis King. They worked for the man who paid for their kids' braces. They worked for the man who kept them on the payroll during the pandemic when every other logistics company was laying people off. "They are saying Dante is panicking," Mike said quietly. "I have a friend in security. He says the boy is screaming at everyone. He fired the IT director an hour ago. Now he is trying to hire hackers to break into your laptop. Let him try, I said, taking a sip of the hot coffee. That encryption is older than he is. Mike looked at me seriously. Otis, this is going to get ugly. Amazon is not playing games. If those trucks do not move by noon, they will sue the company into bankruptcy. You built this place. Are you ready to watch it burn just to teach him a lesson? I looked at Mike. I looked at the drivers in the diner. I am not burning it, Mike, I said. I am fireproofing it. Just then my phone buzzed again. I looked at the screen. Unknown number. Dante had realized I blocked his personal cell. He was calling from a burner or maybe one of the office lines I had not blocked yet. I looked at Mike. It is him, I said. Mike nodded. Answer it. Let him hear the noise of the diner. Let him know where the real power is. I slid my finger across the screen. I put the phone to my ear. Hello, I said, my voice calm. Dad. Dante's voice exploded through the speaker. He was screaming so loud I had to pull the phone away from my ear. You are crazy. You have lost your mind. Do you have any idea what is happening here? Good morning to you too, Dante, I said. Turn it back on. Dante shrieked. Turn it back on right now. The vice president of Amazon is on hold. He is threatening to terminate our 5-year contract. That is a $200 million deal, Dad. Do you understand that? You are destroying my legacy. Your legacy? I asked, my voice dropping an octave. Yes, my legacy, Dante yelled. I am the CEO. I am the chairman. You are nothing. You are a retired old man who is having a senile episode. I will have you arrested. I have already called the police. I told them you are holding corporate property hostage. I took a slow sip of my coffee. I let him scream. I let him vent his fear and his entitlement. When he finally stopped to take a breath, I spoke. Are you done? I asked. No, I am not done, Dante shouted. I want the code. Give me the password, Otis, or I swear to God I will come up to that cabin and beat it out of you. I looked at Big Mike. Mike cracked his knuckles. I am not at the cabin, Dante, I said. Silence on the other end. Where are you? Dante whispered. I am having coffee, I said. With friends. Friends, Dante asked, confused. What friends? You do not have friends. You just have employees. That is where you are wrong, son, I said. And that is why you are failing. Listen to me, old man, Dante hissed. I am giving you 10 seconds. Give me the code or I am sending the lawyers. I will sue you for breach of fiduciary duty. I will take your pension. I will take your house. I will leave you with nothing but that stupid truck. I laughed. It was a dry, hard sound. You are confused, Dante, I said. I am not your father right now. What? Dante stammered. I am not your father, I repeated, my voice cold as ice. You fired your father yesterday. You sent him a text message and told him to get lost. So who are you? Dante asked, his voice trembling. I am a minority shareholder, I said, and I am currently protecting my intellectual property from a management team that I believe is incompetent and reckless. But, Dante started. The license belongs to me, Dante, I interrupted. It is in my name, not the company name, me, and I reserve the right to revoke access to any user who violates the terms of service, and treating the founder like garbage violates my terms. You cannot do this, Dante screamed. We are family. Family, I asked. I looked at the text message from yesterday. Do not come back. Family does not fire family via text, Dante. I am hanging up now. Wait, Dante pleaded. Dad, please. What do you want? Just tell me what you want. I want you to learn, I said. And then I pressed the red button. I put the phone down on the table. The diner was silent. Everyone was looking at me. They had heard the screaming on the other end. Big Mike nodded slowly. Minority shareholder, he said, grinning. That is a new one. It is accurate, I said. I looked at the phone. It started ringing again immediately. Unknown number. I turned it over face down. I looked at Mike. How long can the boys hold out, I asked. Mike looked at the 50 drivers in the room. As long as it takes, Mr. King. We have got savings. We have got pride. And we have got you. Good, I said, because this is just the beginning. I picked up the menu. I think I will have the pancakes, Mike. It is going to be a long day. Outside, the sun was climbing higher. But in the glass tower of King Global Logistics, the darkness was just setting in. Dante King was finding out that you can inherit a title, but you cannot inherit respect. And he was finding out that the man he called a dinosaur was the only thing standing between him and the abyss. The knock on my door came at 3 in the afternoon. It was not a police knock. It was not a delivery knock. It was a soft, hesitant tapping that was designed to sound harmless. I looked through the peephole. It was Tiffany. She was not wearing her usual power suit or the diamond earrings that cost as much as a new sedan. She was wearing a simple gray sweater and jeans. Her hair was pulled back in a loose ponytail, and her face was scrubbed clean of makeup. To the untrained eye, she looked like a worried daughter-in-law coming to check on an aging father. To me, she looked like a wolf wearing a wool coat. I opened the door. She did not wait for an invitation. She threw her arms around me. She smelled of expensive soap and desperation. "Oh, Dad," she sobbed into my chest. "I am so sorry. This has all gone too far. Please, we just want to be a family again." I stood there, stiff as a board. I did not hug her back. I knew exactly what this was. This was the Judas maneuver. When intimidation fails, they try manipulation. When the stick does not work, they offer a poisoned carrot. She pulled away, wiping a tear from her cheek. I suspect she had practiced that tear in the rear-view mirror of her Mercedes before walking up my driveway. "Dante is a mess," she said, her voice trembling. "He has not slept. He is not eating. He knows he made a mistake, Dad. He is just under so much pressure from the board. He wants to make it right. Please come to dinner tonight. Just us. No lawyers, no investors, just family breaking bread." I looked at her. I looked at the performance. It was good, almost Oscar-worthy. "What time?" I asked. 7:00, she said, brightening up. "At our house. Please, Dad. For Dante." I nodded. "I will be there." She left, skipping down the walkway like she had just won a prize. She thought she had reeled me in. She thought the lonely old man was desperate for connection. She did not know that I was not going to dinner to make peace. I was going to dinner to see exactly how low they were willing to sink. I went to my closet. I pushed past the few nice suits I owned. I pushed past the tuxedo I wore to charity galas. I reached all the way to the back and pulled out a suit I had not worn in 15 years. It was brown polyester. It was out of style. It was a little shiny at the elbows, and the hem was frayed. It was the suit I wore when I signed my first major contract in 1985. It was the suit of a working man. I put it on. It was tight in the shoulders. I looked in the mirror. I did not look like the CEO of a billion-dollar logistics empire. I looked like a retired truck driver living on a pension. "Good," I whispered. "Let them see what they are really fighting." I drove my truck to their house. It was a massive modern mansion in Buckhead with white columns and manicured hedges that looked fake under the streetlights. It was a house built on debt and appearances. Dante opened the door. He looked terrible. His eyes were red and he had not shaved. But when he saw me in my old brown suit, a flicker of relief crossed his face. He thought I looked defeated. He thought I looked like I had given up. "Come in, Dad," he said quietly. The dining room was dimly lit. The table was set with their finest china. There was roast beef and expensive wine. It was a scene of domestic perfection, but the air was so thick with tension you could cut it with a knife. We ate in silence for the first 20 minutes. The only sound was the clinking of silver against porcelain. Finally, Tiffany cleared her throat. She reached under the table and pulled out a leather folder. She placed it next to the roast beef. "We have been doing a lot of thinking, Dad," she said, her voice soft and sweet. "We know we hurt you, and we want to fix it. We want you to be comfortable. You have worked so hard your whole life. You deserve to rest." Dante opened the folder. He slid a document toward me. "It is a retirement package," Dad, Dante said, avoiding my eyes. "It is generous. Extremely generous." I put down my fork. I put on my reading glasses. I looked at the paper. The numbers were bolded. Monthly stipend, $10,000. Full medical coverage. Access to the company country club membership. And at the bottom in fine print was the condition. In exchange for the immediate transfer of all administrative privileges, master license keys, and voting rights to Dante King. I read it twice. $10,000 a month. To a man who built a company worth $500 million. They were offering me an allowance, like I was a child, like I was a dependent ward of the state. I looked up. Dante was watching me nervously. Tiffany was watching me like a hawk watching a mouse. Is this it? I asked. It is a lot of money, Dad, Dante said quickly. That is $120,000 a year. You can travel, you can fish, you will never have to worry about bills again. Plus, we will keep you on the company insurance plan, the Platinum plan. I closed the folder. I looked at my son. I saw the fear in his eyes, but I also saw the disrespect. He truly believed that this was what I was worth. He thought my silence could be bought with a country club membership. I started to laugh. It started as a chuckle deep in my chest. Then it grew. It became a belly laugh, a loud, raucous sound that echoed off the high ceilings. Dante and Tiffany exchanged confused looks. What is so funny? Tiffany asked, her smile faltering. You are, I said, wiping a tear from my eye. You two are hilarious. I stood up. I smoothed the lapels of my cheap brown suit. You sit here in this house that my money paid for eating food that my work provided, and you offer me an allowance, I said. My voice dropping the humor instantly. I tapped the table with my finger. I drove trucks through blizzards while you were sleeping in a warm crib. Dante, I fought off hijackers in Detroit while you were playing video games. I built this empire with sweat and blood and steel, and you think you can buy me out with $10,000 a month? I shook my head. I do not need your money, Dante. I have money. What I have is respect, and that is something you cannot put in a contract. I pushed the chair back. The answer is no. Dante's face fell. He looked like he was about to cry. Dad, please, he whispered. You have to sign it. The bank. They are calling the loans. If we do not get the system back up tomorrow. That sounds like a management problem, I said, turning to leave. Good luck with that. I walked toward the door. Sit down, Otis. The voice was sharp. It was not the sweet voice of the daughter-in-law. It was the voice of the predator. I turned around. Tiffany was standing up. Her face was no longer soft. It was hard and ugly. I said, sit down, she hissed. You are not walking out of here until you sign that paper. Or what, Tiffany, I asked. You will cry again. No, she said. She reached into her purse. She pulled out another envelope, a manila envelope. If you do not sign that transfer, she said, holding the envelope up, we are going to release this to the press and to the court. What is it? Dante asked, looking confused. Tiffany, what are you doing? Shut up, Dante, she snapped. She looked at me. A cruel smile played on her lips. These are medical records, Otis, she said, from Dr. Evans. I frowned. Dr. Evans was my cardiologist. I have never seen Dr. Evans for anything other than my heart, I said. Tiffany laughed. Oh, we know that. But these records say differently. She opened the envelope and pulled out a forged document. According to this report, she read, walking closer to me, you have been showing signs of early onset Alzheimer and dementia for 2 years. It details episodes of confusion, paranoia, and erratic behavior. It says you are no longer competent to manage your own affairs, let alone a major corporation. My blood ran cold. You forged medical records, I whispered. We call it a creative interpretation, Tiffany said. We have a doctor willing to testify that he wrote this. For a price, of course. She slammed the paper onto the table next to the contract. Here is your choice, Otis. Option A. You sign the transfer, take the money, and retire with dignity as the beloved founder who stepped down to go fishing. Option B. We release this. We file for emergency guardianship. We tell the world that the great Otis King has lost his mind. We will drag you into court. We will humiliate you. We will make sure everyone thinks you are senile and crazy, and then we will take control of the company anyway. She leaned in close, her eyes shining with malice. So what is it going to be, old man? Do you want to be rich, or do you want to be crazy? I looked at Dante. He was staring at his wife in shock. You made that up, he stammered. Tiffany, you cannot do that. That is illegal. It is necessary. Tiffany screamed at him. Do you want to lose everything, Dante? Do you want to be poor? Shut up and let me handle this. I looked at the forged paper. I looked at the contract. I looked at the woman who was willing to destroy my reputation to save her lifestyle. And I looked at my son who was too weak to stop her. I felt a strange calmness settle over me. They had crossed the line. They had left the realm of business and entered the realm of war. I reached into my pocket. I pulled out my phone. What are you doing? Tiffany demanded. Calling your lawyer? No, I said. I looked her dead in the eye. I am checking to see if my voice recorder app is working. I held up the phone. The red light was blinking. Recording. 0:15:32. Tiffany's face went white. You recorded this, she gasped. Every word I said. I put the phone back in my pocket. I did not sign the paper. I did not scream. I walked to the door. You should have taken the fish, Tiffany, I said. Now you are going to choke on the hook. The flashing lights of a police cruiser reflected against the window of my front door. It was 9 in the morning on a Tuesday. I was drinking Earl Grey tea and reading the Wall Street Journal. The stock for King Global Logistics had dropped 12% since the shutdown began. The market was reacting exactly as I predicted, but the police car in my driveway was a variable I had not accounted for. I watched 2 officers walk up the path. They were young. One was white, the other Hispanic. They looked nervous. They had their hands resting near their belts, not on their guns, but close enough to send a message. I did not get up immediately. I took a slow sip of my tea. I have seen those lights before. I closed my eyes, and for a second I was back in 1968. I was driving through Mississippi delivering auto parts. A sheriff with a chewing tobacco stain on his chin had pulled me over. He did not ask for my license. He asked me what a boy like me was doing in a truck like that. He put me in a cell for 2 days, just because he could. He called it vagrancy. I called it being black in America. I survived that, Sheriff. I survived the riots. I survived the union busters who tried to break my knees in the 80s. So 2 young officers in my driveway in 2024 did not scare me. They just disappointed me. I opened the door before they could knock. Mr. Otis King, the white officer asked. He held a clipboard. I am Mr. King, I said. Can I help you, officers? We have a court order, sir, the officer said. He did not look me in the eye. He looked at my shoes. He looked at the cane leaning against the door frame. A court order for what I asked. Emergency protective custody, the officer mumbled. A petition was filed this morning by your son, Dante King. It states that you are suffering from an acute cognitive decline and that you pose a danger to yourself and the corporate assets under your control. We are here to escort you to St. Mary Hospital for a mandatory psychiatric evaluation. I looked past the officers. A black Tesla pulled up to the curb behind the police cruiser. Dante stepped out. He was wearing a suit that cost $3,000, but he looked cheap. He stood by the car, arms crossed, watching the police do his dirty work. He could not look me in the eye when he fired me, and now he could not look me in the eye when he tried to have me committed. I looked back at the officer. My son says I am crazy, I asked, my voice level. The document says you are suffering from dementia, sir, the officer said. It says you locked down a critical infrastructure system and you do not understand the consequences of your actions. We just need to get you checked out. It is for your own safety, my own safety. That is the phrase they always use when they want to take away your freedom. I stepped out onto the porch. The morning air was cool. I am not going anywhere, I said. Mr. King. Please, the Hispanic officer said, stepping forward. Do not make this difficult. We have an order signed by a judge. If you refuse, we are authorized to use restraints. I looked at him. I saw the tension in his jaw. I saw the way his fingers twitched. In his eyes, I was not a CEO. I was not a grandfather. I was just an old, defiant black man. And in this country, that is a dangerous thing to be. Dante walked up the driveway. He stopped 10 feet away behind the protection of the badges. Just go, Dad, Dante said. His voice was fake soft, fake caring. Fake. It is just a checkup. Tiffany and I are worried about you. You are acting erratic. You are destroying the company. You are not yourself. I looked at him. I am exactly myself, Dante, I said. That is what scares you. Officer, take him, Dante said to the police. He is confused. He thinks he is still running the company. It is sad, really. Just put him in the car. The white officer reached for my arm. Mr. King, I need you to turn around and place your hands behind your back. I gripped my cane. I did not move. I calculated the distance. I calculated the force. I was 72, but I was not helpless. But I knew that if I raised that cane, they would put me on the ground. And if I went to the ground, Dante won. He would have the footage he needed. The angry, senile old man attacking the police. I took a deep breath. I was about to let them cuff me when I heard the screech of tires. A silver Porsche Panamera whipped around the corner and slammed on the brakes right behind Dante Tesla, blocking him in. The door flew open. "Step away from my client." The voice was sharp, clear, and commanding. It was Sarah. Sarah Washington was 32 years old, the same age as Tiffany. But where Tiffany was all plastic and pretense, Sarah was steel and brilliance. She was the daughter of my first mechanic. I had paid for her law school tuition at Yale. She was the best corporate litigator in Atlanta, and she was the only person Dante feared more than me. She marched up the driveway in 4-inch heels, holding a leather briefcase like a shield. "Officer, if you touch him, I will have your badge on my desk by lunch," she said. The officer froze. "Who are you?" "I am Mr. King, personal attorney," Sarah said, flashing a card. "And you are attempting to execute an emergency guardianship order based on fraudulent evidence." She turned to Dante. "Hello, Dante," she said coldly. "Nice try." Dante's face went pale. "Sarah," he stammered, "you cannot be here. This is a family matter. Dad is sick." "Your dad is sharper than you are," Sarah snapped. She opened her briefcase. She pulled out a document stamped with a federal seal. "Officer," she said, turning back to the police. "The petition filed by Mr. Dante King claims that his father has been suffering from cognitive decline for 2 years, correct? That is what the paperwork says." The officer nodded. "Well, that is interesting," Sarah said, "because here is a Federal Aviation Administration Class 1 medical certificate, dated last Tuesday." She held the paper up. "Mr. King is a licensed pilot," she continued. "As part of his license renewal, he underwent a comprehensive physical and cognitive exam administered by an FAA-designated senior examiner." She pointed to the score. "He passed with flying colors. Perfect vision, perfect reflexes, and a cognitive score in the 99th percentile for his age group." She looked at Dante. "To get this certificate, you have to be fit enough to fly a plane at 20,000 feet, Dante. You have to be able to make split-second life or death decisions. The FAA does not give these to people with dementia." She turned back to the officer. "So, officer, you have a choice. You can believe a forged note from a doctor who is currently being investigated for prescription fraud. Yes, we know about Dr. Evans. Or you can believe a federal government document issued 3 days ago." The officer looked at the certificate. He looked at Dante. "Mr. King," the officer said to Dante, "is this true?" Dante sputtered. I did not know. He never told me he was flying." "He does not have to tell you," Sarah interrupted. "He is a grown man, and he is legally competent, which means this emergency order is based on perjury." Sarah took a step closer to the officer. "If you put handcuffs on him," she said, "you are participating in a kidnapping. And I will sue this department for civil rights violations so fast your head will spin." The officer lowered his hand. He stepped back. He looked at the clipboard, then he handed it back to Dante. "We cannot enforce this, Mr. King," the officer said. "The medical evidence is contradictory. You need to go back to civil court." "But he is crazy," Dante shouted, losing his composure. "He locked the trucks. He is bankrupting us." "That sounds like a business dispute, sir," the officer said. "Not a police matter." The officers turned around. They walked back to their cruiser. They wanted no part of Sarah Washington. Dante stood there alone on the driveway. He held the clipboard, his knuckles white. He looked like a child who had been told Santa Claus was dead. I looked at him. I felt a pang of pity, not because he lost, but because he was so bad at fighting. Sarah walked over to me. She adjusted my collar gently. "Are you okay, Uncle O?" she whispered. "I am fine, Sarah," I said. "Just a little excitement for a Tuesday." She smiled. Then she turned to Dante. She walked up to him until she was standing right in his face. She lowered her voice so the neighbors would not hear, but I heard every word. "You played your ace, Dante," Sarah whispered. "You tried to use the police. That was stupid." Dante glared at her. "Stay out of this, Sarah. You are just an employee." Sarah laughed. "I am not an employee, Dante. I am the executioner." She leaned in closer. "Your dad asked me to look into the company finances," Sarah said. "Specifically, the marketing budget." Dante's eyes widened. "We found the transfers," Sarah whispered. "The funds moving from the marketing account to a shell company in the Cayman Islands. The shell company registered to your wife's maiden name." Dante swallowed hard. He looked at the house where Otis King had raised him. He looked at the father he had tried to destroy. What are you talking about?" he stammered. We requested an independent audit this morning, Sarah said. The forensic accountants are going through 5 years of records. They are looking at every lunch, every trip, every diamond earring. She patted him on the shoulder. If I were you, Dante, I would stop worrying about your dad's mental health. She smiled a shark smile. I would start worrying about why your wife has a separate passport hidden in her safety deposit box. Dante took a step back. He looked like he had been punched in the gut. Get off my property, I said from the porch. Dante looked at me. He opened his mouth to speak but closed it again. He turned around, got into his Tesla, and drove away. He drove fast, too fast, like a man running from a fire. Sarah watched him go. He did not know about the money, she said. No, I said. He is a fool, but he is not a thief. Tiffany is the thief. He is just the getaway driver. Sarah nodded. The audit will be ready in 48 hours, she said. Good, I said. I looked at the police car disappearing down the street. They tried to take my freedom, Sarah. I know, Uncle O. Now, I said, gripping my cane. Now we take everything. The elevators at King Global Logistics headquarters are lined with gold leaf. I paid for that gold 10 years ago to impress a client from Dubai. Today, as the doors slid open on the 30th floor, that gold looked less like a decoration and more like the bars of a very expensive cage. I stepped out into the hallway. My cane struck the marble floor with a heavy, deliberate rhythm. Click, clack, click, clack. I was not alone. Flanking me were Sarah Washington and a team of 4 forensic accountants from the firm of Deloitte & Touche. These were not the friendly neighborhood tax preparers. These were financial surgeons. They carried briefcases full of extraction tools, and they had faces that had never smiled at a joke. We marched toward the executive suite. The office was quiet, too quiet. The cubicles were empty because with the system down there was no work to do. The few employees remaining stared at us in silence. They knew who I was, and they knew that when the retired king walks back into the castle with a demolition crew, something big is about to fall. Dante met us at the double-glass doors of the boardroom. He looked like he had not slept in 3 days. His tie was loose. His eyes were bloodshot. He smelled of stale coffee and fear. You cannot go in there, Dad, Dante said, blocking the door with his arm. We are in a crisis meeting. I did not stop walking. I am the crisis, Dante. I said. Sarah stepped forward. She held up a thick binder. Per the bylaws of King Global Logistics Corporation, she said, her voice cutting through the air like a razor, Mr. Otis King, as the holder of 40% of voting shares and possessor of veto rights, exercises his privilege to demand an immediate emergency audit of all discretionary spending accounts. Dante tried to hold his ground. This is harassment, he stammered. You are disrupting operations. Sarah smiled. There are no operations, Dante. The trucks are parked. The only thing moving in this company right now is money, and we are here to find out where it is going. She pushed past him. The accountants followed, flowing into the room like water. They did not ask for permission. They opened their laptops. They connected to the secure server ports. They began to dig. Dante followed us in, helpless. He sank into his chair at the head of the table. Tiffany was there too. She was sitting by the window, filing her nails. She looked bored. She looked annoyed that her morning routine was being interrupted by something as trivial as her father-in-law saving the company from her husband's incompetence. She did not look up when I sat down. Make it quick, Otis, she said. We have a lunch reservation at Le Bilboquet. I looked at her. I looked at the diamond bracelet on her wrist. It caught the light. It was beautiful. It was also evidence. We sat in silence for an hour. The only sound was the clicking of keyboards and the hum of the air conditioning. Then the lead accountant, a man named Mr. Henderson, stopped typing. He adjusted his glasses. He looked at the screen, then he looked at me. Mr. King Henderson said, his voice dry and devoid of emotion. We have found a significant anomaly in the marketing ledger. Dante's head snapped up. Anomaly, he asked. What kind of anomaly? Mr. Henderson turned his laptop around. There is a recurring monthly transfer of $50,000 to a vendor called Vanderbilt Marketing Solutions, Henderson said. This vendor has been on the payroll for 3 years. The total disbursement is close to $2 million. Dante frowned. Vanderbilt. That is Tiffany's maiden name. He looked at his wife. Tiffany stopped filing her nails. She froze. Babe, Dante asked, "What is Vanderbilt Marketing Solutions?" "I thought your family business went under years ago." "It is a consulting firm," Tiffany said quickly. Her voice was tight. I provide branding advice, strategic partnerships. It is standard industry practice, Dante." Mr. Henderson cleared his throat. "We checked the invoices," Mrs. King Henderson said. "They are generic. Branding services, consultation fees. However, we traced the IP address of the receiving bank account." He tapped a key. A map appeared on the screen. "The account is not in Atlanta," Henderson said. "It is in the Cayman Islands, and the funds do not stay there. Within 24 hours of receipt, they are wired to 2 specific locations." Where Dante asked, his voice barely a whisper. "The Wynn Casino in Macau," Henderson read, "and the account of a luxury goods holding company in Paris that owns Hermès and Cartier." The room went dead silent. Dante stood up slowly. He looked at the woman he had married. The woman he had defied me for. The woman he had tried to steal my company for. "You are gambling it away," Dante whispered. Tiffany slammed her nail file onto the table. "So what?" she screamed. Her mask of boredom shattered, revealing the ugly desperation underneath. "My family has debts, Dante. My father made bad investments. We needed cash, and I needed to maintain my image. Do you expect me to wear rags while you play CEO? You stole $2 million from the company," Dante shouted. "From me. From us," Tiffany corrected him. "We are married. What is yours is mine." I watched them. I did not say a word. I did not have to. The rot was exposing itself. Just then Dante's phone began to ring. It was a harsh, jarring sound in the tense room. He looked at the screen. His face went from pale to gray. "It is the bank," he whispered. "Answer it," I said. Dante picked up the phone. He put it on speaker. His hand was shaking so bad he almost dropped it. "Mr. King," a crisp, professional voice came through the speaker. "This is Jonathan from Private Wealth Management. We have been monitoring the situation with King Global Stock." "Yes," Dante said, his voice cracking. "It is just a temporary dip, Jonathan. We are fixing it." "I am afraid the market does not see it that way," Mr. King, the banker, said. "The stock has dropped 40% in 3 days. As you know, your personal line of credit is secured by your equity portfolio," I know, Dante said. "With the current valuation, you have fallen below the maintenance requirement," the banker continued. "This is a margin call, Mr. King. We need you to deposit $4 million in cash by close of business today to cover the spread." "$4 million?" Dante gasped. I do not have $4 million liquid. You know that. It is all tied up in the house and the cars." "Then we will be forced to liquidate your position," the banker said. "We will sell your shares at market value to cover the loan. And Mr. King, given the volatility, we will also be moving to foreclose on the collateralized assets, including your primary residence." The line went dead. Dante dropped the phone. It hit the mahogany table with a thud. He sank back into his chair. He looked like a man who had been shot. "Did you hear that?" he whispered to the room. "They are going to sell my shares. They are going to take the house." He looked at me. His eyes were pleading. "Dad," he said, "you have cash. You have the savings from the old days. Help me. Please, cover the margin." I looked at him. "I have cash, Dante," I said, "but I do not invest in sinking ships, and I definitely do not invest in thieves." Dante turned to Tiffany. He grabbed her hand. She pulled it away as if his touch burned her. "Tiffany," he said, desperate, "we have assets. The jewelry, the watches, the Birkin bags. You have $1 million worth of stuff in your closet. We can sell it. We can go to the pawn shop right now. It won't cover everything, but it will buy us time." Tiffany stood up. She smoothed her skirt. She looked at her husband with a look of absolute coldness. A look that said she had already calculated the exit strategy. "Are you insane?" she asked. "Babe, please," Dante begged. "It is for the company. It is for our house." "It is for your mistakes," Tiffany snapped. She grabbed her purse. The purse that cost $20,000. Money that belonged to my drivers. "Those are my things, Dante," she said. "They were gifts. You gave them to me. They are my property." "But we are going to lose the house," Dante cried. "Then you better figure something out," Tiffany said. Because I am not selling a single earring to clean up your mess. She turned to leave. Where are you going? Dante asked. I have a lunch reservation, Tiffany said, checking her watch. And after that I am calling my lawyer. I think I need to protect my assets from your bankruptcy. She walked out the door. The click of her heels faded down the hallway. Dante sat alone at the massive table. The accountants were still typing. Sarah was organizing her files. He looked at me. He looked small. He looked like a boy who had broken a window and realized nobody was coming to fix it. She took the money, Dad, he whispered. And now she won't even help me save the house. I stood up. I buttoned my jacket. You wanted a trophy wife, Dante, I said. I walked to the door. You forgot that trophies are just hollow pieces of metal. They do not have a heart. And they definitely do not have a spine. I signaled to Sarah. We are done here, I said. We left him there in the silence of the boardroom. The margin call was ticking. The wife was gone. The father was walking away, and the king was finally learning what it meant to be a pauper. They brought in the heavy artillery at midnight. My son Dante did not hire a local IT repair shop. He hired a firm called Cyber Fortress based in Silicon Valley. These were the kind of people who charge $500 an hour to break into bank vaults and government servers. They flew in on a private jet carrying servers that looked like something out of a NASA control room. I sat on the dock of my cabin in Lake Tahoe, watching the moon reflect off the black water. My old ThinkPad was open on my lap. The screen was dim, but it told me everything I needed to know. I could see them probing my firewall. It looked like 1,000 tiny needles trying to find a soft spot in the skin of an elephant. I took a sip of whiskey. It was smooth and warm against the chill of the mountain air. Dante was trying to brute force his way back into the kingdom. He thought that if he threw enough processing power at the problem, the doors would open. He thought that code was just math. He did not understand that my code was poetry written in a language only I spoke. On my screen, a warning light blinked yellow. They were getting close to the employee database. They were trying to bypass the biometric lock by mirroring the drive. It was a smart move. If they could copy the data, they could build a new system parallel to mine and reboot the fleet. I smiled. You want the data, Dante. You want the names of the drivers. You want the delivery manifests for Amazon and Walmart. You want the routing history for the last 10 years. Fine. I typed in a command string. It was simple. GHOST, initiate ghost protocol. I pressed enter. 3,000 miles away in the server room of King Global Logistics, the humidors of the expensive cooling systems were humming. The hackers were high-fiving each other. They thought they had breached the wall, and then the lights went out. Not the room lights, the data lights. On the massive monitors lining the wall, the spreadsheets began to vanish. The customer names flickered and disappeared. The route maps turned blank. The financial records dissolved into white noise. It was not deleted. I am not a vandal. I am a preservationist. The data was simply being encrypted and moved to a hidden partition deep within the kernel. It was like a submarine engaging a cloaking device. To the outside world, the King Global database was now empty. I could imagine the screaming. I could imagine the lead hacker typing furiously, his face pale, realizing that the prize he had just grabbed had turned to smoke in his hands. But the digital blackout was just the opening act. The real show was happening on the asphalt. Dante thought he could run a logistics company with computers. He forgot that computers do not drive trucks. People drive trucks. At 6 a.m., the sun rose over the port of Los Angeles. This is the busiest container port in the Western Hemisphere. It is a chaotic city of steel containers, cranes, and diesel fumes. Every day, 500 of my trucks line up at Gate 4 to pick up cargo. But today, Gate 4 was empty. Well, not empty. It was blocked. The first truck in the line was driven by a man named Old Sal. Sal had been with me since 1990. He pulled his massive rig up to the gate, turned off the engine, and put on his hazard lights. Then he picked up his radio. "Dispatch, this is Unit 401, he said, his voice crackling over the frequency. "I'm afraid I cannot move the vehicle." "Why not?" Sal, the terrified dispatcher in Atlanta, asked. "I am feeling mighty sick," Sal said. "I think it is the flu. It came on sudden like. My legs just won't work." Behind him, the second truck stopped. "Dispatch, this is Unit 402. I am feeling it too. Must be contagious." One by one, the radios lit up. 500 drivers at the port, 300 drivers in Chicago, 200 in New Jersey. They all had the same mysterious illness. They called it the blue flu. It was a strike. But it was not a loud, angry strike with picket signs and chanting. It was a silent strike. It was a ghost strike. The trucks sat there like beached whales. They blocked the loading docks. They blocked the exit ramps. They created a gridlock so massive that the Port Authority had to shut down operations. Dante was now fighting a war on two fronts. In the cloud, his data had vanished. On the ground, his fleet was paralyzed. I cast my fishing line into the dark water. The reel clicked softly. I pictured Dante running around his office. He was probably screaming at the hackers to find the data. He was probably screaming at the drivers to get back on the road. But you cannot scream at a ghost Dante, and you cannot fire a man who is already sick. My phone vibrated on the dock. I did not pick it up. I knew who it was. It was probably the Port Authority threatening to tow the trucks. Good luck towing 500 fully loaded 18-wheelers without the keys. I reeled in the line slowly. This was the lesson I had tried to teach him for years. He always rolled his eyes when I told him. Technology is a tool, son, I used to say. It is a hammer, but a hammer cannot build a house by itself. You need a hand to hold it. You need a heart to guide it. Dante had treated the drivers like components. He cut their benefits. He tracked their bathroom breaks with sensors. He tried to replace their judgment with algorithms. And now the algorithms were blank and the components were refusing to work. He was the captain of a ship with no crew and no charts floating dead in the water while a storm approached. And the storm was named Apex Tech. I caught a small trout. I unhooked it gently and threw it back into the water. I was not hungry. Around noon, my burner phone buzzed. It was a text from Sarah. She sent me a screenshot of an email. It was marked high importance. It was from the CEO of Apex Tech, the company that was supposed to buy us out. The company that Dante had sold his soul to impress. The email was short. Corporate sharks do not waste words, Mr. King, it read. It. Due to the catastrophic failure of your logistics network and the apparent loss of all customer data, we are triggering the material adverse change clause in our acquisition agreement. I read on. Unless full operational capacity is restored within 24 hours, Apex Tech will formally withdraw its offer to purchase King Global Logistics. Furthermore, we will be filing a lawsuit for damages incurred due to your misrepresentation of the company assets. You have 24 hours. Signed, the Board of Directors, Apex Tech. I put the phone down. 24 hours. That was the deadline. If Dante could not fix this by tomorrow noon, the deal was dead. The money he needed to pay his debts would vanish. The stock would go to zero. He would be left with a bankrupt company, a mountain of lawsuits, and a reputation so toxic he would not be able to get a job managing a drive-thru. I looked at the sun high in the sky. Dante was running out of time. He had the hackers. He had the lawyers. He had the MBA. But he did not have the password. And more importantly, he did not have the respect of the men and women who held the keys to the ignition. I packed up my fishing gear. I walked back up to the cabin. I made myself a sandwich. I took a nap. I was not worried. I knew exactly what was going to happen next. When a man is drowning, he does not care about dignity. He does not care about pride. He will grab onto anything that floats. And right now, I was the only life raft in the ocean. I checked the security camera feed on my laptop. A black helicopter was landing on the helipad of the King Global building in Atlanta. Dante was running toward it. He was coming to me. He was not coming to negotiate. He was coming to beg. Or maybe he was coming to fight. I sat on the porch and waited. I placed my cane across my lap. "Come on, son," I whispered. "Come and see the man you threw away. Come and learn that you cannot digitize a soul. The clock is ticking, Dante." Tick-tock. My daughter-in-law, Tiffany, realized that she could not beat me in the boardroom and she could not beat me in the courtroom, so she decided to try the court of public opinion. She decided to weaponize the one thing she had in abundance: tears. I sat in my living room with Sarah, my lawyer, watching the 65-inch television screen. We were not watching the news. We were watching Instagram Live. Tiffany was sitting on the floor of her walk-in closet. She was wearing no makeup, which for her was a calculated costume choice. The lighting was soft. She looked fragile. She looked like a victim. She wiped a tear from her cheek and looked directly into the camera lens. "Hi, guys," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I did not want to do this. I really didn't. But I just do not know where else to turn." Sarah snorted. "She is looking at the follower count," Sarah said. "Look at the numbers. Otis, 50,000 people are watching this garbage." I stayed silent. I watched. My father-in-law, Tiffany, continued sniffing loudly, "is a monster." He is destroying us. He is jealous. He cannot stand the fact that his son is younger and smarter and more successful. So he locked us out. He shut down the company just to hurt Dante. He is willing to bankrupt a family legacy just because he has to be the center of attention. She paused for dramatic effect. It is toxic masculinity, she said. It is narcissism. And it is breaking my heart to watch my husband suffer. We are just trying to modernize. We are just trying to build a future. And he is burning it down. The comments on the screen were flying by fast. Stay strong, Queen. Boomers are the worst. Cancel Otis King. He sounds like a senile tyrant. Sarah turned off the TV. She was shaking with rage. We sue her, Sarah said, pacing the room. We sue her for defamation right now. That is libel Otis. She is lying to 50,000 people. No, I said. I took a sip of my tea. If we sue her, we look guilty, I said. If we sue her, we look like bullies trying to silence a crying woman. So what do we do? Sarah asked. Let her destroy your reputation. The stock dropped another 5% while she was talking. The media is eating this up. CNN just ran a segment asking if it is time for mandatory retirement ages for CEOs. I stood up. I walked to the window. She wants a show, Sarah, I said. She wants drama. She is fighting with emotion. I turned around. So we are going to fight with arithmetic. Get me on television, Sarah, not a local station. Get me the biggest financial news network in the country. Get me Fox Business. Get me the primetime slot. Sarah looked at me skeptical. You want to go live? She asked. With Charles Payne. He is tough, Otis. He eats executives for lunch. I smiled. I am not an executive, Sarah. I am a truck driver. Make the call. 6 hours later, I was sitting in a studio in downtown Atlanta. The lights were hot. The cameras were robotic eyes staring me down. Across from me on a giant monitor was the host broadcasting from New York. We went live in 3, 2, 1. Welcome back, the host said, his voice booming. We are joined now by the man at the center of the logistics crisis that has paralyzed American supply chains, the founder of King Global, Otis King. Mr. King, the host, started leaning into the camera. Your daughter-in-law says you are sabotaging your own son out of jealousy. Your investors say you are holding the economy hostage. Why are you doing this? I looked straight into the camera. I did not blink. I did not smile. I am doing this because a truck does not run on feelings, I said. The host paused. Excuse me. I leaned forward. Tiffany says I am jealous. I said, my voice calm and steady. Jealous of what? I built a company from a single truck to a global empire. I have generated $500 million in shareholder value. My son has generated a 40% loss in 3 days. Jealousy implies I want what he has. I do not want failure. The host narrowed his eyes. But Mr. King, the host pressed. You revoked the software license. You shut down the fleet. Isn't that a vindictive move? Why not just step down and let the next generation lead? Because the next generation does not know how to lead, I said. I pulled a piece of paper from my pocket. Let us look at the numbers, I said, holding it up. Under my leadership, on-time delivery rates were 98%. Employee retention was 95%. I pointed to the paper. Under Dante King, in the last 6 months alone, on-time delivery dropped to 82%. Why? Because he fired the veteran dispatchers and replaced them with an AI program that sent trucks into rivers. Employee turnover, I continued, hit 40%. Why? Because he cut their health benefits to pay for a rebranding campaign that cost $2 million. I looked at the host. This is not about ego, sir. This is about competence. You do not hand the keys of a Ferrari to a teenager just because he wants to look cool. You hand them over when he knows how to drive. The host looked at his notes. He was surprised. He expected a ranting old man. Instead, he got a CEO who knew his metrics. But Mr. King, the host, said, softening his tone slightly, the public perception is that you are, well, out of touch. Your son says you refuse to adapt to modern technology. I laughed. A dry, short laugh. I wrote the code that runs the system, I said. I coded it in C++ in 1998 while my son was watching cartoons. I looked directly into the lens, addressing the millions of people watching. Addressing the trolls in Tiffany comment section. Technology is a tool, I said. It is not a replacement for character. My son wants to run a logistics company from a country club. I ran it from the loading dock. And here is my challenge, I said. If Dante King can back an 18-wheeler into a loading bay without hitting the walls, I will sign the company over to him tonight. I paused. If he can change a blown tire on the side of I-95 in the rain, I will retire. But until he knows what it feels like to carry the weight of this country economy on his back, he is not fit to sit in my chair. The studio was silent. The host sat back. He looked at me with a new expression. Respect. Well, folks, the host said, you heard it here first. The king has thrown down the gauntlet. The segment ended. The lights dimmed. Sarah ran over to me holding her tablet. She was grinning from ear to ear. Look at this Uncle O, she said, showing me the screen. Twitter was exploding. But the tide had turned. Hashtag Team Otis was trending #1 in the United States. People were posting comments like, the old man just cooked him. Finally, a CEO who actually works. I would trust Otis with my life. Tiffany livestream was getting buried under a mountain of support for the working man. The narrative shifted instantly from toxic father to incompetent son. But the real victory was not on social media, it was on the ticker tape. While I was speaking, King Global stock had plummeted another 10%, not because people lost faith in the company, but because the market finally realized the truth. The market realized that without Otis King, the company was worthless. The investors were dumping shares because they knew Dante could not meet my challenge. They knew he was a fraud. I walked out of the studio. I felt tired but strong. I checked my phone. No missed calls from Dante. He was probably hiding under his desk. No texts from Tiffany. She had lost her audience. But then the phone rang. It was a number I recognized. It was a New York area code. It was not family. It was business. I answered. Hello. Mr. King, a voice said. This is Robert Sterling. I represent the Vanguard Group. We hold 15% of your company shares. I know who you are, Robert, I said, walking toward the car. Mr. King Sterling said, his voice tight. We made a mistake. We listened to your son. We thought he was the visionary, and now I asked. Now we are looking at a bankruptcy filing, Sterling said. The stock is in free fall. Amazon has officially triggered the breach of contract clause. Mr. King, we are bleeding out. What do you want, Robert? I asked. We want you back, Sterling said. I stopped walking. We want you to return as chairman. Sterling continued, his voice desperate. We will reinstate your salary. We will give you full control. Just turn the trucks back on, please, before the market opens tomorrow. I smiled. I looked at Sarah. She gave me a thumbs up. I am retired, Robert, I said. I am enjoying my fishing. Name your price, Sterling said quickly. Anything. Stock options. Bonuses. We will fire Dante. We will fire the whole board. Just come back. I looked at the city lights of Atlanta. I do not want money, Robert, I said. Then what? I want a meeting, I said. Tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. At the old warehouse, not the headquarters, the warehouse. Okay, Sterling said. Who should be there? Everyone, I said. The entire board, the investors, Dante, and Tiffany. I paused. And tell them to wear work boots, Robert. Why? Sterling asked, confused. Because I said, we are going to clean up a mess. The text message from Dante arrived at 4 in the afternoon. It was simple, and it sounded defeated. Meet me at Warehouse 4. I am ready to surrender. I cannot fight you anymore, Dad. Come alone. I just want to sign the papers and go home. I read the message sitting in the passenger seat of Big Mike truck. Mike looked over at me, his face grim. Warehouse 4. Mike grunted. That is where you started, isn't it, Otis? That is right, Mike, I said. 1980. It was just a tin shed with a leaky roof and 2 trucks. I slept on a cot in the back office for 3 years. Mike shifted gears, the massive engine of his Peterbilt growling. Why does he want to meet there? Mike asked. Why not the office? Why not the lawyers? Because he wants to play on my nostalgia, I said. He thinks if he gets me in the place where I built the legacy, I will get sentimental. He thinks I will look at the old walls and remember him as a little boy playing with toy trucks on the floor. He thinks I will soften. And will you? Mike asked. I looked out the window at the passing city. I am not sentimental about buildings, Mike. I am sentimental about respect. And Dante has burned that bridge down to the pilings. We pulled up to the warehouse district as the sun was starting to set. The shadows were long and stretching across the cracked asphalt. Warehouse 4 sat at the end of a dead-end street. It looked abandoned. The King Global sign above the bay door was faded, the paint peeling from decades of sun and rain. I told Mike to park around the back behind a stack of shipping containers. "Wait here," I said. "Give me 5 minutes. If I do not walk out in 10, you know what to do." "I do not like this," Otis Mike said, checking the tire iron under his seat. "It smells wrong." "I know," I said. "That is why I brought the cavalry." I grabbed my cane and walked to the front entrance. The small metal door squeaked as I pulled it open. The inside of the warehouse was dim. Shafts of dusty light cut through the high windows. It smelled of diesel oil, old rubber, and stale air. It was the smell of my youth. Dante was standing in the middle of the empty floor. He was standing next to an old wooden desk. My old desk. The one I used to dispatch trucks from before we had computers. He looked terrible. His suit was wrinkled, his tie was gone. He looked like a man who had not slept in a week. "Dad," he called out, his voice echoing in the vast empty space. "Thank you for coming." I walked toward him, my cane tapping on the concrete. Click, clack, click, clack. "Where are the lawyers, Dante?" I asked, stopping 10 feet away. "You said you wanted to surrender." "Surrenders happen on paper. I wanted to talk to you first," Dante said, his voice trembling. "Man to man, before the lawyers get involved, before I lose everything." He took a step toward me. "I messed up, Dad. I know I did. Tiffany. She got in my head. She made me think I could do it better. She made me think you were holding me back. But I see now. I see I cannot run this without you." He looked down at the floor. "I just want to make it right. I want to give you the admin access back. I want to unlock the trucks. Just tell me what to do." I looked at him. For a second, just a fraction of a second, I felt a pull in my chest. He was my son. He looked broken. But then I saw his eyes flick to the shadows behind a stack of pallets. It was a small movement, a nervous tick, but a truck driver notices everything. "You have to." I gripped my cane tighter. "You want to make it right?" I asked. "Yes," Dante said, looking up. "Just unlock the system, Dad. Let us get the fleet moving, then we can sign whatever you want." I smiled, a cold, sad smile. "You are lying, Dante." Dante's face hardened. "What?" "You did not bring any papers," I said, "and you did not come here to talk." I pointed my cane at the shadows. "You brought him." Dante's face went pale. "Come out," I shouted. "I know you are there." From behind the pallets, a man stepped out. He was huge, at least 6'4". He was wearing tactical gear, black combat pants, and a tight t-shirt that showed off steroid-induced muscles. He was not a police officer. He was private security, a mercenary. He walked toward me, smacking a baton into his open palm. Dante took a step back, letting the giant step in front of him. "I am sorry, Dad," Dante whispered. "I really am. But I do not have a choice. Amazon is suing me. The bank is foreclosing. I need that code." "So this is your plan?" I asked, looking at the mercenary. "You are going to beat the password out of a 72-year-old man." The mercenary laughed. "No beating, old-timer," he said. His voice was gravel. "Just a little persuasion. We just need your thumb." He pointed to a tablet sitting on the old desk. "You are going to walk over there. You are going to scan your biometric print, and you are going to unlock the server. If you do that, you walk out of here. If you do not..." He snapped the baton open. It extended with a sharp metallic hiss. "Then I am going to break your fingers one by one until you decide to cooperate." I looked at Dante. He was looking away, unable to watch. "You are going to let him do this?" I asked. "Just scan the print, Dad," Dante cried. "Please, just give it to me." I looked at the mercenary. He was closing the distance. "You are making a mistake, son," I said to the big man. The mercenary sneered. "I do not think so, old man. You are crippled. You are alone. And you are holding a stick." I checked my watch. 10 minutes. "I am not alone," I said. Before the mercenary could take another step, a sound filled the warehouse. It was a low rumble, then a roar, then the screech of metal. The massive bay door at the back of the warehouse began to rise. Sunlight flooded in, blindingly bright. Silhouettes appeared in the opening, 4 of them. They walked in slowly. They did not run. They did not shout. They just walked with the heavy, deliberate gait of men who have carried the world on their shoulders for 50 years. Big Mike was in the lead holding a tire iron. Next to him was Sal. Sal was 70 years old, short and wiry. He was a tunnel rat in Vietnam. He was holding a heavy chain. Then there was Tiny, ironically named because he was wide as a doorframe. He was holding a sledgehammer. And finally, Blue-Eyed Earl, the quietest man I ever knew. Earl was a sniper in the Marines. He was not holding anything. He did not need to. They walked up and stood beside me, a wall of flannel denim and gray hair. The mercenary stopped. He looked at the four old men. He looked at their eyes. He did not see fear. He saw history. He saw men who had survived jungle's riots and decades of hard labor. "Who are these geriatrics?" The mercenary scoffed, trying to sound tough. "These are the shareholders," I said. Big Mike took a step forward. He slapped the tire iron against his hand. It made a sound much louder than the baton. "You threatening Mr. King, Mike?" asked, his voice low and rumbling like a diesel engine. The mercenary looked at Mike. Then he looked at Tiny, who was swinging the sledgehammer like it was a toothpick. Dante screamed, "Get them! Do your job! I paid you $5,000. The mercenary looked at Dante. Then he looked back at the five of us. He did the math. He realized that muscles from a gym do not stack up against strength from a life of survival. He realized that if he swung that baton, he might hurt one of us, but the other four would bury him under the concrete floor. "I am not getting paid enough for this," the mercenary muttered. He retracted his baton. He turned around and walked out the side door without looking back. Dante stood alone in the center of the warehouse. He looked at the empty door where his hired muscle had fled. He looked at the four men surrounding me. He looked small. He looked like a child lost in a supermarket. The old guard did not move. They just stared at him with absolute disappointment. Dad, Dante whimpered. I walked up to him. I stood so close I could smell the fear on him. I looked him up and down. "You brought a stranger to hurt your father," I said softly. Dante started to cry. Ugly, sobbing tears. "I was desperate," he choked out. I shook my head. "Hunger makes you desperate, Dante. Poverty makes you desperate. Greed just makes you weak." I turned to Mike. "Let us go, Mike. The air in here is bad." We turned our backs on him. "Dad, wait!" Dante shouted. "What are you going to do?" I stopped at the door. I looked back at him standing in the dust of the empty warehouse. "I am going to let you sit in the dark, Dante. You are not a king," I said. "You are just a coward with a checkbook." And the check just bounced. We walked out into the sunset, leaving him there alone with his ghosts. Dante had failed. He had walked into the warehouse with a mercenary and walked out with nothing but his shame. I watched him drive away, his taillights fading into the darkness, and I knew the war was not over. It had simply changed commanders. Dante was the face of the rebellion, but his wife Tiffany was the architect. I went back to my house. I sat in my leather armchair in the study. The room was dark, illuminated only by the embers of the fire in the hearth. I was tired. My bones ached. I had won every battle for 3 days straight, but victory is heavy when you are fighting your own blood. At 10 p.m. the doorbell rang. I did not have to check the camera. I knew who it was. I opened the door. Tiffany stood there. She was alone. She was soaked from the rain that had started to fall, but she did not look pathetic. She looked like a viper that had just shed its skin. She was wearing a trench coat belted tight at the waist. Her eyes were dry and cold. "May I come in, Otis?" she asked. Her voice was steady. I stepped aside. She walked into the hallway, dripping water onto the hardwood floors. She did not apologize. She walked straight into the living room and poured herself a drink from my decanter without asking. She took a sip of the bourbon and turned to face me. "Dante is a fool," she said. I leaned on my cane. "He is your husband, Tiffany," I said. "He is a child," she corrected me. "He came home crying. Otis. He curled up on the bed and wept because you scared him with your old war buddies. He is useless. He cannot save the company. He cannot save the house." She took another step toward me. "But I can." I looked at her. "You are out of plays, Tiffany," I said. "The stock is tanking. The bank is foreclosing. And tomorrow morning, Apex Tech is going to pull the offer." "You have lost." Tiffany smiled. It was a terrifying expression. It was the smile of a poker player who is holding an ace up her sleeve while the building burns down around her. I have not lost Otis, she said softly, because I have something you want. Something you want more than the company, more than your pride, more than anything in the world. I frowned. I have $50 million in the bank, Tiffany, I said. There is nothing you have that I cannot buy. Tiffany reached into the pocket of her trench coat. She did not pull out a weapon. She did not pull out a legal document. She pulled out a small folded piece of paper. It looked like a medical printout. She placed it on the coffee table. Pick it up, she said. I walked over. I picked up the paper. I put on my reading glasses. It was an ultrasound image, a grainy black and white picture of a womb, and in the center a tiny bean-shaped blur. I stared at it. My heart skipped a beat. Then it started hammering against my ribs. Coretta and I had tried for years to give Dante a sibling. We failed. And for the last 10 years since Dante got married, I had prayed for a grandchild. I wanted to see the king line continue. I wanted to teach a little boy how to fish. I wanted to teach a little girl how to drive a truck. I looked up at Tiffany. Is this? I stammered. I am 10 weeks pregnant, Otis, she said. I looked back at the image. A grandchild, a new life, a chance to start over, a chance to fix the mistakes I made with Dante. For a moment the anger faded. For a moment I was just an old man looking at his future. But then Tiffany spoke again, and the ice returned to the room. It is a boy, she said. The first grandson, the heir to the empire. She took a sip of her drink, watching me closely. But you know, Otis, raising a child is expensive and stressful, especially when you are bankrupt, especially when your father-in-law has destroyed your livelihood. I looked at her. The warmth in my chest turned to absolute zero. What are you saying, Tiffany? I asked. She walked over to the fire. She looked into the flames. I have an appointment tomorrow morning, she said casually, as if discussing a hair appointment, at the clinic downtown, at 10 a.m. My hand shook. The ultrasound paper rustled. You would not, I whispered. I have to, she said, turning to look at me with dead eyes. I cannot bring a child into a broken home, Otis. I cannot raise a baby in poverty. If Dante loses the company, I am going to divorce him. I will leave Atlanta, and I will not take any baggage with me. She pointed to the paper in my hand. That is baggage. She was holding an unborn child hostage. She was using my own flesh and blood as a bargaining chip. It was the most evil thing I had ever witnessed in 72 years of life on this earth. I wanted to strike her. I wanted to throw her out of my house. But I looked at the picture, that tiny blur. That was my blood. That was Coretta legacy. If I kicked her out, she would do it. I knew she would. She was cold enough. She was calculating enough. She would terminate the pregnancy just to spite me. What do you want? I asked, my voice hoarse. Tiffany smiled. She knew she had drawn blood. I want the codes, she said. I want you to unlock the system. I want you to sign the transfer agreement tonight, before the markets open. And if I do, I asked. Then you get your grandson, she said. I will cancel the appointment. I will stay with Dante. You can play grandpa. You can build him a treehouse. You can leave him the company in your will. She checked her watch. You have 12 hours, Otis. The appointment is at 10. If the trucks are not moving by 9, I am walking into that clinic. She finished her drink and set the glass down on the mantelpiece. Think about it, she said. Do you want to be right? Or do you want to be a grandfather? She walked out. The door clicked shut behind her. I stood there in the silence, holding the ultrasound. I sank into my chair. I felt defeated. I could fight banks. I could fight lawyers. I could fight hackers. But I could not fight this. I closed my eyes. I saw Coretta face. She used to talk about grandchildren all the time. She had a box in the attic full of baby clothes she had saved. Otis, she would say. Our job is not done until we see the next generation. I looked at the clock. It was 11 p.m. I had to give in. I had to save the baby. I reached for my laptop. I was ready to type in the unlock code. I was ready to surrender. But then a thought struck me. Tiffany was a liar. She lied about the marketing budget. She lied about her love for Dante. She lied about the medical records. Why would she tell the truth about this? But the ultrasound looked real. Her name was on the top. The date was correct. I needed to be sure. I put the laptop down. I picked up my phone. I scrolled past the lawyers and the business contacts. I found a number I had saved 6 months ago, but never used. Jim Vance Private Investigations. Jim was an ex-police detective who specialized in high-stakes infidelity cases. I had hired him when Tiffany first started spending weekends in Miami for consulting trips. I had told him to just keep an eye on things. I had never asked for a report because I was afraid of what I would find. But now I needed to know. I dialed the number. Jim answered on the second ring. "Mr. King," he said. "It is late. I need the file." "Jim," I said. "The file on the daughter-in-law," Jim asked. "Yes," I said. "Everything you have. Tonight." "Mr. King," Jim said, his voice hesitant. "Are you sure?" "I have been sitting on this for months waiting for you to ask. It is not pretty. Just bring it," I said. 45 minutes later, headlights swept across my living room window. Jim Vance walked in. He was a heavy-set man with tired eyes. He was carrying a thick manila envelope. He handed it to me without a word. I opened it. There were photos. Lots of them. Photos of Tiffany in Miami. Photos of Tiffany in New York. Photos of Tiffany at expensive restaurants. And she was not alone. In every photo, she was with a man. A tall, handsome man in a sharp suit. I recognized him. It was Leonard Sterling. Dante, personal lawyer. The man who had drawn up the transfer papers. The man who was supposed to be protecting my son's interests. I flipped through the photos. They were intimate. Hand-holding, kissing, entering hotels together. My hands trembled. But then I saw the dates on the photos. I picked up the ultrasound picture Tiffany had left. 10 weeks pregnant, she had said. I looked at a photo of Tiffany and Leonard in Cabo San Lucas. It was dated exactly 12 weeks ago. Then I looked at my calendar. 12 weeks ago, Dante was in Tokyo. I had sent him there to negotiate with a shipping partner. He was gone for 3 weeks. I did the math. I looked at the ultrasound again. I looked at the photos of the lawyer. And then I looked at the date of Dante's trip. The math did not add up. The baby was real. Tiffany was telling the truth about being pregnant. But she was lying about the most important part. I looked at Jim. "Did she know you were following her?" I asked. "No," Jim said. "She was careless. She thought she was untouchable." I stood up. The grief in my chest vanished, replaced by a cold, burning fury. "She tried to sell me a bastard child," I whispered. "She tried to trade another man baby for my legacy." I looked at the clock. Midnight. I had 9 hours until her deadline. I picked up the phone. "Jim," I said, "do you have a copy of these photos?" "Yes, sir," Jim said. "Send them to Sarah," I said, "and tell her to meet me at the office at 8 a.m. And Jim, one more thing." "Yes, Mr. King. Find out where Leonard Sterling lives. I want him at that meeting, too." I looked at the ultrasound one last time. Then I threw it into the fire. I watched it curl up and turn to ash. "You overplayed your hand, Tiffany," I said to the flames. "You thought the baby was your ace, but you forgot that I count cards." The morning sun sliced through the dusty windows of Warehouse 4, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. It was 8 a.m. on the dot. I sat behind my old scarred wooden desk, the one I had bought from a surplus store 40 years ago. On the desk sat a single pen and a stack of legal documents. The players in this tragedy began to arrive. First came Sarah, my attorney. She walked in with her head held high, carrying a briefcase that contained the ammunition I needed. She stood to my right, silent and imposing. Next came Leonard Sterling, Dante, personal lawyer and best friend since college. He looked nervous. He kept adjusting his tie and checking his watch. He did not look at me. He sat at the far end of the makeshift conference table we had set up. And finally Dante and Tiffany. They walked in together, but they were miles apart. Dante looked like a man walking to the gallows, hoping for a pardon. He was pale, unshaven, and shaking. Tiffany, on the other hand, looked like she was walking down a runway. She wore a white dress and oversized sunglasses. She held her head high, radiating the confidence of a woman who thought she held the winning lottery ticket. They sat down across from me. Dante looked at the papers on the desk. He saw the transfer of ownership agreement. He saw the reinstatement of the software license. He saw his salvation. "Thank you, Dad," Dante whispered. He sounded like a child. "Thank you for doing the right thing." I did not smile. I did not nod. I just looked at him. "I am doing this for the family." "Dante," I said. Tiffany took off her sunglasses. She looked me in the eye. "We appreciate it, Otis," she said, her voice dripping with fake sweetness. "We really do. You are going to love being a grandfather. It changes everything." I looked at her stomach. It was flat beneath the expensive fabric of her dress. "A grandson," I said softly. "The first king of the new generation." "Yes," Tiffany said, placing a hand protectively over her belly. "He is going to be strong just like his father, and just like you." I picked up the pen. The room went silent. You could hear a pin drop on the concrete floor. Everyone was watching my hand. Dante was holding his breath. Leonard was wiping sweat from his upper lip. Tiffany was leaning forward, her eyes hungry for the signature that would secure her fortune. I brought the pen tip to the paper, but then I stopped. I looked up at Dante. "Son," I said, "before I sign this, I want to talk about Tokyo." Dante blinked, confused. "Tokyo?" he asked. "Yes," I said. "That trip you took 4 months ago, the negotiations with the shipping partners in Japan?" Dante frowned. "What about it, Dad? That was a great trip. We closed the deal. I was there for 3 weeks." I nodded. I remember I said, "You left on November 1st, you came back on November 22nd, you were working 18-hour days, you barely had time to sleep, let alone call home." Dante looked at Tiffany. He looked back at me. "Yeah, Dad, I know. I worked hard. Why are we talking about this now? Just sign the papers." I put the pen down. "Because Dante," I said, "math is a stubborn thing. It does not care about feelings. It only cares about facts." I reached into the drawer of my desk. I pulled out the ultrasound image Tiffany had given me the night before, or rather the copy she had left. "Tiffany told me last night she is 10 weeks pregnant," I said. Tiffany shifted in her seat. Her smile faltered. "That is right," she said quickly. 10 weeks. We just found out." I shook my head. I looked at the paper. "Sarah," I said, "can you read the medical data on the top left corner of this scan?" Sarah stepped forward. She leaned over and read clearly. "Gestational age 16 weeks and 4 days." The silence returned, but this time it was heavy, suffocating. Dante furrowed his brow doing the mental calculation. 16 weeks, he whispered. "That is 4 months. He looked at Tiffany. "Babe, you said 10 weeks. 4 months ago. 4 months ago was November." He paused. "I was in Tokyo in November." Tiffany's face went rigid. She laughed a high-pitched, nervous sound. "Oh, Dante, do not be silly," she said. "The doctors get the dates wrong all the time. It is an estimate. Besides, you came back at the end of the month. It probably happened right when you got home." I reached into the drawer again. I pulled out the manila envelope that Jim, the private investigator, had given me. "No, Tiffany," I said. "It did not happen when he got home. Because while he was in Tokyo building this company, you were in Miami." I slid the first photo across the table. It was a grainy shot, but clear enough. Tiffany in a bikini lying on a lounge chair by a pool at the Fontainebleau Hotel. And lying next to her, rubbing sunscreen on her back, was a man. Dante looked at the photo. He looked at the man in the picture. Then he looked up across the table. He looked at Leonard Sterling. Leonard's face had turned a sickly shade of gray. He was staring at the table, unable to move. Dante picked up the photo. His hands were shaking so hard the paper rattled. "Leo," he whispered. "Leonard," I said, my voice cold. "You are his lawyer. You are his best friend. You stood beside him at his wedding." Leonard did not speak. He just closed his eyes. I slid the next photo across. This one was more intimate. Leonard and Tiffany entering a hotel room elevator. Leonard's hand was on her waist. She was laughing, kissing his cheek. And finally I slid the third photo. This one was dated November 10th, the middle of Dante's trip. It showed Tiffany and Leonard walking out of a fertility clinic in Miami. "She is not 10 weeks pregnant, Dante," I said. "She is 16 weeks pregnant, and that child does not share your DNA." Dante stood up slowly. The chair scraped loudly against the concrete. He looked at the ultrasound image. He looked at the photos. He looked at his wife. Tiffany sat frozen. Her mask was slipping. The arrogance was replaced by fear, but only for a second. Then it was replaced by something uglier, rage. She snatched the photos off the table. "You old bastard," she screamed at me. "You spied on me. You hired a detective to stalk me. You are a pervert, a sick, twisted old man." "Is it true?" Dante asked. His voice was broken, a whisper of pure agony. Tiffany turned to him. She did not apologize. She did not cry. She attacked. "Oh, grow up, Dante," she snapped. "You were never around. You were always working, always trying to please your daddy. I was lonely. Leonard was there. He listened to me. He treated me like a woman, not a trophy. So you slept with my best friend, Dante shouted, tears streaming down his face. I did what I had to do, Tiffany yelled back. And guess what? That baby is the only good thing that has happened to this family in years. At least Leonard is a real man. At least he knows how to take what he wants. Dante looked at Leonard. Leonard stood up, backing away, his hands raised. Dante, listen, man, Leonard stammered. It just happened. We were drunk. It did not mean anything. It meant a child, Dante screamed. He lunged across the table. He grabbed Leonard by the lapels of his expensive suit and slammed him onto the concrete floor. Dante, I shouted, stop! But Dante was past hearing. He punched Leonard in the face. Once, twice. Leonard scrambled backward, bleeding from his nose, crawling away like a cockroach. Dante turned to Tiffany. He looked at her with such hatred that she actually flinched. Get out, he whispered. Tiffany straightened her dress. She regained her composure. Fine, she said. I will leave. But I am taking half Dante. I am taking half the house, half the accounts, and I am suing you for stress-induced trauma to my unborn child. No, you are not, Sarah said, stepping forward. Sarah opened her briefcase and pulled out another document. This is a prenuptial agreement, Sarah said. We never signed a prenup, Tiffany sneered. Dante said he trusted me. He did, Sarah said. But the company bylaws require all executive officers to have spousal asset protection clauses to prevent exactly this kind of corporate espionage. Sarah smiled. Otis signed it for him. As the chairman at the time, he had the authority to bind the executive shares. You get nothing, Tiffany. No stock, no alimony. And since you just admitted to adultery on tape, I pointed to my phone, which was recording on the desk. You will be lucky if you do not get sued for fraud. Tiffany looked at me. She looked at Sarah. She looked at the ruined Leonard wiping blood from his face. She realized the walls had closed in. She looked at Dante one last time. You are pathetic, she spat. You will always be a daddy boy. She turned and marched out of the warehouse, her heels clicking on the concrete, echoing like gunshots. Leonard scrambled up and ran after her, leaving his briefcase behind. Dante stood alone in the center of the room. He looked at the door where his wife and best friend had fled. He looked at the photos scattered on the floor. He looked at me. He did not look like a CEO. He looked like a little boy who had fallen off his bike and skinned his knees. He fell to his knees, he put his head in his hands, and he screamed. It was a primal sound, a sound of absolute heartbreak. He sobbed until his shoulders shook, until he could not breathe. I stood up. I walked around the desk. I stood over him. I did not hug him, not yet. He needed to feel this pain. He needed to understand that the shiny surface of his life was just a veneer. He looked up at me, his face wet with tears, his eyes red and swollen. They are all gone, Dad, he whispered. Everyone. Tiffany, Leonard, the baby. It was all a lie. I nodded. Yes, son, I said. It was. He reached out and grabbed the hem of my jacket. I have nothing left, he sobbed. I lost the company. I lost my wife. I lost my best friend. I am nothing. I looked down at him. I looked at the warehouse around us. The dust, the old steel beams, the smell of diesel. This was where I started when I had nothing. You are not nothing, Dante, I said. You are just at the bottom. And the bottom is the only place where you can build a foundation that will not crack. I reached out my hand. Stand up, I said. Dante looked at my hand, my calloused, scarred black hand. He reached up and took it. I pulled him to his feet. He stood there, swaying, slightly broken and bleeding inside. Now, I said, handing him a handkerchief. Wipe your face. We have work to do. The parasites are gone. The truth is out. Now we can finally start the real meeting. The sound of Tiffany heels clicking away on the concrete floor of the warehouse faded into silence, but the echo of her final words hung in the air like toxic smoke. She had stripped Dante bare in less than 5 minutes. She had revealed that his marriage was a lie. She had revealed that his unborn son was a stranger, and she had revealed that the woman he betrayed his father for was nothing more than a corporate raider with a pretty face. I watched Dante standing there in the dust. He looked like a man who had been hollowed out. He was staring at the door where she had exited, as if expecting her to come back and say it was all a joke. But Tiffany Vanderbilt did not joke about money, and she certainly did not joke about survival. She had screamed that she was taking half. Even with the prenuptial agreement Sarah had produced, I knew Tiffany would find a way to bleed him. She would go after the liquid cash. She would go after the cars. She would drag his name through the mud in every divorce court in Atlanta until he paid her to go away. Dante turned to look at me. His eyes were wide and vacant. He looked at the photos of his wife and his best friend scattered on the floor. He looked at the ultrasound of the baby that wasn't his. Then he ran. He did not run toward me. He ran out the door into the rain. He jumped into his Tesla and sped away, tires screeching, leaving me standing in the warehouse with Sarah and the old guard. "Let him go," Sarah said softly, touching my arm. "He needs to be alone, Otis." I shook my head. "He does not need to be alone, Sarah. He needs to be saved. But I am not sure I am the one who can save him anymore." I went home. I sat in my study listening to the rain hammer against the roof. I did not turn on the lights. I just sat in the dark holding a glass of whiskey I did not drink, waiting for the inevitable knock on the door. It came at 2 a.m. It was not a knock. It was a pounding. A frantic, desperate hammering that shook the frame of the house. I opened the door. Dante fell into the hallway. He was soaked to the bone. His expensive suit was ruined, covered in mud and oil. He had lost his shoes somewhere. He was shivering violently. He looked up at me. His face was a mask of absolute terror. "Dad," he choked out. "Dad, please." He crawled toward me on his hands and knees. He grabbed my legs, burying his face in my trousers. He was sobbing uncontrollable, heaving sobs that racked his entire body. "I lost her, Dad," he wailed. "She is gone." She cleared the joint account. I checked the app. She took the cash. She took the emergency fund. She took everything. I stood there looking down at my son. I wanted to reach down and pull him up. I wanted to wrap a blanket around him and tell him it would be okay. That is what a father does. When your child scrapes his knee, you kiss it and make it better. But this was not a scraped knee. This was a severed artery. And I knew that if I put a bandage on it now, the infection would kill him. "I lost the baby," Dante cried. "It was not mine, Dad. It was Leonard Baby, my best friend." They were laughing at me. The whole time they were laughing at me. He looked up at me, his eyes pleading. "I am bankrupt, Dad. The margin call. The bank is going to take the shares tomorrow. If I lose the shares, I lose my seat on the board. I will be nothing." He grabbed my hand. His grip was wet and cold. "Help me, Dad. Please. You have the money. You can cover the margin. Write the check. Save the house. Save the company. I will do anything you say. I will work in the mailroom. I will sweep the floors. Just do not let me lose everything." I looked at him. I looked at the boy I had named after a poet, hoping he would have a soul of depth. Instead, he had become a shallow vessel filled with other people's desires. My heart was breaking. Every instinct in my body screamed at me to go to the safe, get the checkbook, and end his suffering. I had $50 million. I could make this problem go away with the stroke of a pen. I could save his house. I could save his reputation. I could buy him a new start. But then I heard Coretta's voice in my head. "Ambition without struggle is just greed, Otis." If I saved him now, what would he learn? He would learn that he could betray his father, destroy a company, and marry a shark, and his daddy would still be there to clean up the mess. He would learn that consequences are for poor people. He would learn that he is untouchable. If I saved him now, I would be killing the man he could become. I pulled my hand away from his grip. Dante fell forward onto the floor, his support gone. I stepped back. "I cannot do it, son," I said. My voice was rough but steady. Dante looked up confused. "What?" "I cannot write that check," I said. Dante scrambled to his knees. But you have the money. You can fix this. You are Otis King. You fix everything." "I fix the company," I said, "because the company employs 5,000 families who did nothing wrong. I fix the legacy because it belongs to your mother as much as it belongs to me." I looked him in the eye. "But I cannot fix you, Dante. Not with money." "Dad, please." Dante begged, crawling toward me again. "They are going to take my home. They are going to put me on the street." "Then you will go to the street," I said. Dante froze. You want me to be homeless?" he whispered. "I want you to be a man," I said, my voice rising. I pointed at the door. "You stood in my office 3 days ago and told me I was obsolete. You told me I was nothing. You thought you were a king because you wore a suit and signed papers, I wrote. I shook my head. You are not a king, Dante. You are a puppet. Tiffany pulled your strings, Leonard pulled your strings, the bank pulled your strings, and now that the strings are cut, you have collapsed. I leaned down until my face was level with his. If I pick you up now, I am just putting the strings back on. I am just becoming your new puppeteer, and I love you too much to do that. Dante stared at me. The shock was replacing the grief. You are letting me drown, he whispered. No, I said, standing up straight. I am teaching you how to swim. I walked to the door and held it open. The rain was pouring down outside, a sheet of gray water. Go home, Dante, I said. But I do not have a home, he cried. Then go find one, I said. Go find a place you can pay for with money you earned. Go find a woman who loves you for your heart, not your wallet. Go find yourself. Dante stood up slowly. He looked at me with a mixture of hatred and disbelief. He could not understand. He had never been told no in his life. You are cruel, he spat. You are a cruel old man. Maybe, I said. But one day you will thank me. He walked out into the rain. He did not look back. He looked small and fragile in the darkness. I closed the door. I locked it. Then I slid down against the wood and sat on the floor. I buried my face in my hands and I wept. I wept for the little boy who used to sit on my lap and steer the truck. I wept for the son I had failed by giving him too much. I sat there for an hour listening to the silence. Then my phone buzzed on the hall table. It was a notification. Sarah had set up an alert on Dante's financial status. I picked up the phone. The screen lit up with a message from the First National Bank. Notice of default. The message was automatic, cold, precise, to Dante King. Due to failure to meet the margin call requirement of $4 million by the close of business date, your collateralized assets have been seized. I read the next line. Foreclosure proceedings have been initiated on the property located at 1500 Tuxedo Road. That was his house. And the next line. All equity positions in King Global Logistics held in your name have been liquidated at market value to cover the debt. He was gone. He was homeless. He was penniless. And he was no longer a shareholder. I turned off the phone. The puppet had fallen. The stage was empty. Now we would see if there was a real man hiding in the wreckage. The boardroom of King Global Logistics usually smelled of fresh coffee and expensive cologne. Today, it smelled of fear. It smelled of sweat soaking through starched shirts. It smelled of impending ruin. I stood outside the double mahogany doors listening to the chaos inside. It was 9 a.m. on Wednesday. The deadline from Apex Tech had passed an hour ago. The deal was dead. The stock had opened at $4 a share, down from 40. The company I built with my bare hands was trading for the price of a latte. Inside, I could hear shouting. I could hear Robert Sterling, the lead investor, yelling at someone. I could hear the desperate tapping of fingers on glass tables trying to find a lifeline that did not exist. I adjusted my tie. It was a red tie, the color of power, the color of warning. Beside me stood Marcus Stone. Marcus was the senior vice president of operations for Amazon. He was a man who moved more packages in a day than most countries moved in a year. He was 6'2" with a shaved head and a handshake that could crush a brick. He was not a man who wasted time, and he was the only reason we were not already in bankruptcy court. Are you ready? Otis Marcus asked, checking his watch. I gripped my cane. I was born ready, Marcus, I said. Let us go clean house. I pushed the doors open. The room went silent instantly. 20 men and women turned to look. These were the board members, the investors, the people who had voted to remove me 3 days ago because I was too old, because I was a dinosaur. Now they looked at the dinosaur and prayed he knew how to stop an asteroid. Dante was there. He was sitting at the head of the table in the chairman's seat, but he did not look like a chairman. He was wearing the same ruined suit from last night. He had not shaved. His eyes were hollow, vacant, staring at nothing. He looked like a ghost haunting his own funeral. I walked into the room. Marcus followed me. We did not sit down. We stood at the opposite end of the table facing Dante. Mr. King, Robert Sterling stammered, standing up. Thank God. Did you unlock the system? Not yet, Robert, I said, my voice echoing in the silent room. Why not? Sterling cried. The stock is tanking. Apex pulled the offer. We are losing millions by the minute. Turn it on Otis. I tapped my cane on the floor. One loud, sharp crack. Sit down, Robert, I said. Sterling sat. He didn't want to, but the authority in my voice gave him no choice. I looked around the table. 3 days ago, I said, looking at each of them in the eye, you voted to remove me. You said I was obsolete. You said my methods were outdated. You said you wanted innovation. I pointed at the screen on the wall which showed the red line of the stock crashing. There is your innovation, I said. There is your modern leadership. I gestured to Marcus. You all know Marcus Stone from Amazon, I assume. The board members nodded nervously. They knew him. He was the client who paid 40% of our bills. Mr. Stone has a statement, I said. Marcus stepped forward. He did not smile. Amazon is formally terminating its contract with the current management of King Global Logistics. Marcus said, his voice deep and baritone. We cannot trust our supply chain to a leadership team that values branding over reliability. We cannot trust a CEO who does not understand his own infrastructure. Gasps filled the room. Someone dropped a pen. However, Marcus continued, raising a hand. We are willing to sign a new exclusive 5-year contract, a contract worth $3 billion. Sterling eyes bulged. $3 billion. That saves us. That saves everything. Marcus looked at Sterling coldly. There is a condition, Marcus said. What is it? Sterling asked. Anything. We will do anything. Marcus pointed at me. The contract is contingent on Otis King being reinstated as CEO and chairman of the board with full executive authority effective immediately. He looked at Dante. And it is contingent on the immediate removal of Dante King from all operational roles. The room was deadly quiet. I watched Dante. He did not react. He did not protest. He just blinked slowly, like he was watching a movie of someone else's life. Sterling looked at Dante. Then he looked at me. It took him exactly 2 seconds to make the decision. In the corporate world, loyalty has a shelf life of 0 seconds when money is on the table. I move for a vote, Sterling shouted, raising his hand. A motion to reinstate Otis King and remove Dante King. Seconded, another board member yelled. All in favor, Sterling asked. Every hand in the room went up, even the hands of the people Dante had hired, even the hands of his friends. Opposed, Sterling asked. Dante did not raise his hand. He sat there staring at the table, his hands resting on the polished wood. The motion carries, Sterling said. Welcome back, Mr. Chairman. I walked to the head of the table. Dante stood up slowly. He moved like an old man. He stepped aside, leaving the leather chair empty. He looked at me. I am sorry, Dad, he whispered. I looked at him. I am not your dad right now, Dante, I said. I am the CEO, and you are trespassing. Dante flinched. He walked over to the corner of the room and stood against the wall. He had no seat at the table anymore. I sat down. The leather felt familiar. It felt right. I opened the folder I had brought with me. Here is the plan, I said, my voice filling the room. The board members leaned in, desperate for leadership. Number 1, I said, we are scrapping the AI dispatch system. It is garbage. We are going back to the legacy routing protocols. I will unlock the server as soon as this meeting is over. Heads nodded furiously. Number 2, I continued, we are cutting the marketing budget to 0. No more branding consultants. No more parties. No more influencers. We are a trucking company, not a fashion label. I looked at Sterling. We are taking that money, and we are giving every driver a 15% raise, effective today. Sterling frowned. Otis, 15% that is a lot of overhead. The margins are 0 if the trucks do not move. Robert, I snapped, the drivers are the engine. You starve the engine, the car stops. We pay them what they are worth, and they will drive through hell for us. Sterling shut his mouth. He nodded. Number 3, I said, we are selling the corporate jet. We are selling the downtown penthouse. And we are selling the luxury box at the stadium. I looked at the executives around the table. If you want luxury, buy it with your own money. King Global is going back to work. We are going to get grease under our fingernails again. I closed the folder. Any questions? There were none. They were too stunned. They were seeing a man strip away the fat and reveal the muscle of the company. It was brutal, but it was necessary. Good, I said. I pulled my laptop out of my bag. I opened it. I typed in the command. Restore license. I pressed enter. On the big screen behind me, the map of the United States lit up. One by one, the red dots turned green. From Los Angeles to New York, engines were roaring to life. Drivers were cheering in their cabs. The blood began to flow through the veins of the company again. The board members clapped. It was a nervous, relief-filled applause. I did not clap. I looked at Dante. He was watching the map. Tears were streaming down his face. He was watching the empire he almost destroyed come back to life under the hands of the father he tried to kill. Meeting adjourned, I said. I stood up. Marcus shook my hand. Good to have you back, Otis, Marcus said. I was walking toward Dante, intending to finally speak to him as a father, intending to tell him that now that he had lost everything, maybe he could start to find himself. But before I could reach him, the double doors of the boardroom burst open again. It was not a client. It was not a driver. 4 men in windbreakers walked in. On the back of their jackets in bold yellow letters were the words FBI Economic Crimes Unit. They were followed by 2 uniformed officers. The room went silent again. The celebration died instantly. One of the agents, a tall man with a grim face, stepped forward. Is Dante King in the room? He asked. Every eye turned to the corner. Dante looked up. He looked at the agents. He looked at me. I am Dante King, he whispered. The agent walked over to him. He pulled a pair of metal handcuffs from his belt. Dante King, you are under arrest, the agent said. For what? Dante gasped, backing into the wall. I lost the company. I gave it back. What more do you want? We are not here about the company civil issues, Mr. King, the agent said, snapping the cuffs onto Dante's wrists. We are here about the embezzlement of $2 million from the corporate marketing fund, and we are here about the laundering of those funds through an offshore entity in the Cayman Islands. Dante's eyes went wide. That was not me, he screamed. That was Tiffany. That was my wife. She did it. She took the money. The agent nodded. We know, the agent said. We arrested Mrs. Tiffany Vanderbilt King at Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport an hour ago. She was trying to board a flight to Paris with a bag full of cash. Dante slumped against the wall. She had the cash, he whispered. She is in custody, the agent said. And she is talking, Mr. King. She is telling us everything. She says you authorized the transfers. She says you signed off on the invoices. No, Dante yelled, struggling against the cuffs. She lied. She forged my signature. Dad, tell them. Tell them I did not know. He looked at me, his eyes wild with panic. Dad, help me. Please. Do not let them take me. I stood there, my hand gripping the cane. I looked at the agents dragging my son toward the door. I looked at the board members watching in horror. I could hire the best defense attorney in the country. I could use my influence to get him bail. I could spend my fortune to keep him out of prison. But I remembered the forged medical records. I remembered the mercenary in the warehouse. I remembered the arrogance. If he was innocent of the theft, the court would prove it. But he was guilty of being a fool who let a thief into our house. I took a step forward. I looked Dante in the eye. Tell the truth, Dante, I said, my voice breaking slightly. That is the only thing that can save you now. The agents pushed him out the door. I watched my son disappear into the hallway in handcuffs. The room was empty of sound. I sat back down in the chairman chair. I was the king of the castle again. But the castle was empty, and the price of the crown was heavier than I ever imagined. The silence in the boardroom was heavier than the steel of the handcuffs that were now clicking around my son's wrists. The sound was sharp and mechanical, a final punctuation mark to the sentence of his career. Just moments ago, the room had been filled with the nervous energy of a company coming back to life, but now it was filled with the cold reality of the law. I sat in my leather chair at the head of the table. I did not stand up. I did not look away. I watched the federal agents do their job. They were professionals. They moved with efficiency, ignoring the gasps of the board members and the stunned silence of the investors. Dante was struggling, not physically but emotionally. He was twisting his body, trying to look at me, trying to make eye contact, trying to find the father who had saved him from bullies in the 3rd grade. Dad, he shouted, his voice cracking with panic. Dad, tell them this is a mistake. I am the CEO. I was the CEO. You cannot let them take me. The lead agent, a tall man with graying hair and eyes that had seen too many white-collar criminals try to talk their way out of trouble, tightened his grip on Dante's arm. "Mr. King," the agent said calmly, "you have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." "No," Dante screamed. He looked at the board members. "Robert, help me. I made you money. I signed the deals. Tell them I am good for it." Robert Sterling turned his chair away. He looked out the window. "In the corporate world, you are a genius until you are caught, and then you are a leper." Dante was finding out that his golf buddies were not his friends. They were just people who shared a tea time and a profit margin. The agent pushed Dante forward. They began to march him toward the double doors. Dante dug his heels into the carpet. He fought against the momentum. He turned his head so he could look at me one last time. "Why are you doing this?" he yelled. Tears were streaming down his face, mixing with the sweat and the grime of his ruin. "I am your son. I am your flesh and blood. You turned me in. You called them, didn't you?" I slowly stood up. My knees popped. I leaned heavily on my cane. "Yes, Dante," I said. My voice was low, but in that quiet room it sounded like thunder. "I called them." Dante stopped struggling. He stared at me with a look of pure betrayal. "How could you?" he whispered. "How could you send your own son to prison?" I walked around the table. The board members parted like the Red Sea, giving me a wide berth. I walked until I was standing 3 feet from him. I could smell the fear on him. I could see the terror in his eyes. "I did not send you to prison, Dante," I said. "You sent yourself." I pointed to the stack of files on the table, the forensic audit that Sarah and her team had compiled in less than 24 hours. "You took $2 million from the marketing fund," I said. "You authorized the transfers. You signed the invoices. You knew exactly where that money was going. You sent it to an offshore account to cover your wife's gambling debts and her shopping sprees." "I did it for her," Dante sobbed. "She said she needed it. She said she was in trouble. I was trying to protect my family." "I am your family," I shouted. My control broke for just a second. The anger I had held back for days finally spilled over. "I am your family, Dante. These drivers are your family. The people who work in the warehouse are your family. And you stole from them. You took money out of the company that puts food on their tables so your wife could buy handbags and play blackjack." I took a deep breath, steadying myself. "You broke the law, son, and you broke my trust." Dante shook his head. "But I can pay it back. I will work. I will fix it. Just get me a lawyer, Dad. Pay the bail. Do not let me go in there." I looked at him. I looked at the boy I had raised. I remembered teaching him to ride a bike. I remembered his graduation. I remembered the pride I felt when he got his MBA. But I also remembered the forged medical records. I remembered the mercenary in the warehouse. I remembered the disrespect. "I taught you to be honest before I taught you to be a businessman," I said softly. I leaned in close so only he could hear me. "You failed the first class, Dante." Dante's face crumbled. He realized then that I was not coming to the rescue. He realized that the safety net was gone. The agents pulled him away. "Dad," he wailed. "Dad, please." I watched him disappear into the hallway. The heavy doors swung shut, cutting off his cries. I stood there for a long time staring at the wood grain of the door. The room was silent. Robert Sterling cleared his throat. "Mr. King," he said tentatively, that was the hardest thing I have ever seen a man do." I turned around. I walked back to my chair. I sat down. "It was not hard, Robert," I said. "It was necessary." I picked up my pen. "Now let us get back to work." But the justice was not finished yet. The scales had to be balanced completely. 3,000 miles away at Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport, the second act of this tragedy was unfolding. Tiffany Vanderbilt King was sitting in the first-class lounge of Delta Airlines. She was sipping a mimosa. She was wearing a trench coat and oversized sunglasses. Next to her was a Louis Vuitton carry-on bag. She looked calm. She looked like a woman going on a luxury vacation. She checked her phone. She saw the news about the stock crashing. She saw the news about Dante being removed. She smiled. She had timed it perfectly. She had stripped the carcass clean and was leaving before the vultures arrived. She had $50,000 in cash in her bag and a one-way ticket to Paris. She stood up when they called her flight. She walked to the gate. She handed her boarding pass to the agent. The machine beeped. It was a loud, angry red beep. Tiffany frowned. "What is the problem?" she asked. "I am in first class." The agent typed something on her keyboard. She looked up at Tiffany. Her eyes were nervous. "Just a moment, ma'am," the agent said. "There is a flag on your passport." "A flag," Tiffany snapped. "That is ridiculous. I am Tiffany King. My husband owns King Global Logistics. Fix it." "I am afraid I cannot fix it, Mrs. King," a voice said behind her. Tiffany turned around. 2 FBI agents and 2 airport police officers were standing there. "Mrs. Tiffany King," the agent said, "you are under arrest for wire fraud, money laundering, and conspiracy to commit embezzlement." Tiffany laughed, a high-pitched, nervous laugh. "You are joking," she said. "This is a mistake. Call my husband. Call Dante. He will clear this up. Your husband is currently being processed at the Federal Detention Center in downtown Atlanta," the agent said. "He gave a full statement, Mrs. King. He told us everything. He told us about the marketing fund. He told us about the Cayman account. And he told us that you were the one who orchestrated the transfers." Tiffany's face went white. She dropped her bag. "Dante talked," she whispered. "He sang like a bird," the agent said. "He is trying to cut a deal. And from what he told us, you are the mastermind." Tiffany looked at the agents. She looked at the plane visible through the window, her escape route, her freedom. She tried to run. It was a pathetic attempt. She shoved the gate agent and tried to sprint down the jet bridge. The officers were on her in seconds. They tackled her to the ground right there on the blue carpet of gate E12. "Get off me!" she screamed, kicking and scratching. "Do you know who I am? I am a Vanderbilt. My baby. Watch out for my baby." The agent who cuffed her was a woman. She leaned down. "We know about the baby, Mrs. King," the agent said. "And we know about Mr. Leonard Sterling. He is being picked up at his office right now. It seems your whole family reunion is happening in a holding cell today." They dragged her up. Her sunglasses were crushed. Her hair was a mess. The glamorous shark was just a desperate criminal in handcuffs. They marched her through the terminal, past the staring tourists, past the duty-free shops. Back in the boardroom, my phone buzzed. It was Sarah. "Got her," Sarah wrote. "She is in custody. They found the cash. It is over, Otis." I put the phone down. I looked out the window at the Atlanta skyline. I had saved the company. I had saved the jobs of 5,000 people. But I had lost my son. I closed my eyes. I felt a tear roll down my cheek. It was hot and salty. I let it fall. "A king must protect the kingdom," I whispered to myself, "even if it means exiling the prince." The coffee in my mug was cold. It was always cold these days because I never had time to drink it while it was hot. The clock on the wall said 11 p.m., but the office was still buzzing with the sound of work. Not the frantic, panicked work of a crashing company, but the steady, rhythmic hum of a machine that was being rebuilt gear by gear. It had been 3 months since the FBI walked Dante out of this building in handcuffs. 3 months since Tiffany was arrested at the gate trying to flee to Paris. 3 months since the stock market declared King Global Logistics dead on arrival. But we were not dead. We were just starting over. I rubbed my eyes. I was 72 years old and I was working 18-hour days. My doctor told me to slow down. My lawyer, Sarah, told me to hire a CEO. But I could not trust anyone else with the wheel. Not yet. When you drive a truck into a ditch, you do not call a tow truck to pull it out if you have any pride. You get out in the mud and you push it yourself. I looked around my office. It looked different. The abstract paintings that Dante had bought for $50,000 each were gone. I sold them to pay for the new driver lounge in Ohio. The sculpture in the corner that looked like a twisted paperclip was gone too. I sold it to upgrade the safety software for the fleet. The office was bare. It was functional. It was honest. There was a knock on the door. "Come in," I said. A young man walked in. He was carrying a stack of files that looked heavy enough to break a toe. His name was Andre. He was 22 years old, freshly graduated from a community college in South Atlanta. He wore a suit that was clearly bought off the rack at a discount store. The sleeves were a little too short and the shoes were scuffed, but his shirt was pressed crisp and his tie was tied with military precision. I had hired him a week after the arrest. He reminded me of myself 40 years ago. He was hungry, he was polite, and unlike my son, he understood the value of $1 because he had never had enough of them. "Mr. King," Andre said, placing the files on my desk. "I finished the audit on the fuel surcharges. I found the discrepancy you suspected. The previous management was paying 20% above market rate to a supplier in Texas. I nodded. Let me guess. The supplier was a friend of Dante. Andre looked down. Yes, sir. A college roommate. Cancel the contract, I said. And send a demand letter for the overage. I already drafted it, Sir Andre said, handing me a paper. And I found a new supplier. A minority-owned business in Houston. They can guarantee a rate 15% below the index. I looked at the young man. He had been here since 7 a.m. He looked tired, but his eyes were bright. You did good work, Andre, I said. Now go home. It is late. I can stay, Sir Andre said. I know you have the quarterly report to finish. I can help with the spreadsheets. I smiled. It was the first time I had smiled all day. Go home, son, I said gently. The work will be here tomorrow. You cannot build a career if you burn out the engine in the first lap. Andre hesitated, then nodded. Good night, Mr. King. Good night, Andre. I watched him leave. I saw the bounce in his step. He was proud of his work. He was building something. I turned my chair and looked out the window at the Atlanta skyline. I had a son like that once, a son who wanted to help, a son who looked at me with respect instead of envy. I checked my watch. Tomorrow was visitation day. The drive to the Federal Correctional Institution in Talladega was long and quiet. I drove myself. I did not want a driver. I needed the time to think. I needed the time to prepare my heart for what I was about to see. The prison was a stark contrast to the glass tower in Atlanta. It was gray concrete and razor wire. It smelled of industrial cleaner and hopelessness. I went through security. I took off my belt. I took off my watch. I walked through the metal detector. I sat in the visitation room. It was a cold room divided by thick plexiglass. On one side were the free. On the other side were the consequences. The door opened. Dante walked in. He looked different. The expensive haircut was gone, replaced by a buzz cut. The Italian suit was gone, replaced by a beige jumpsuit with a number stenciled on the chest. He had lost weight. His face was gaunt, and there were dark circles under his eyes. But the biggest change was in his posture. He did not walk with the swagger of a CEO. He walked with his head down. He walked like a man who had been stripped of his illusions. He sat down opposite me. He picked up the phone. I picked up mine. Hi, Dad, he whispered. Hi, son, I said. How are you? He asked. It was a polite question, but I could hear the genuine fear behind it. I am tired, Dante, I said. Rebuilding a company is harder than building it the first time. You have to clear away the rubble before you can pour the concrete. Dante flinched. He knew he was the rubble. I heard about the stock, he said. Sarah told me it is back up to $20. It is, I said. The market likes stability, and they like the Amazon contract. Dante looked at his hands. His fingernails were cut short and clean. No more manicures. I am working too, he said softly. Oh, I asked. Yeah, Dante said. In the library. I am organizing the books. It pays 12 cents an hour. He let out a short, bitter laugh. 12 cents, Dad. I used to spend $12 on a bottle of water. I looked at him. Is it hard work? I asked. It is boring, Dante said, but it is quiet. I have time to think. I have a lot of time to think. He looked up at me. His eyes were wet. I saw Tiffany on the news, he said. I nodded. Her trial starts next month. She is pleading not guilty. She is blaming everything on you. Dante shook his head. I let her do it, Dad. I knew it was wrong, but I wanted her to be happy. I wanted her to look at me the way she looked at Leonard. I thought if I bought her enough things, she would love me. He wiped a tear from his cheek with his sleeve. I was so stupid. You were blind, son, I said. Not stupid. Blinded by the lights. Dante leaned closer to the glass. Mom tried to tell me, he whispered. My heart tightened at the mention of Coretta. Before she died, Dante said. She sat me down. She told me to find a woman who would walk with me in the mud, not just ride in the carriage. She told me that character is what you do when nobody is watching. He started to cry. Silent, heavy tears. I did not listen to her dad. I spit on her memory. I turned into everything she hated. I am sorry. I am so sorry. I watched him cry. For the first time in 10 years, I did not see the arrogant executive. I saw my son. I saw the human being hiding underneath the ego. The shame was burning the arrogance away. It was painful to watch, but it was necessary. Fire destroys, but fire also purifies. I reached into my pocket. I pulled out a small book. It was not a new book. It was an old leather-bound journal. The cover was cracked and stained with oil. I held it up to the glass. "What is that?" Dante asked, wiping his eyes. "This is my logbook," I said. "From 1975. Dante squinted at it. "I wrote everything in here I said, every mile I drove, every dollar I made, every mistake I made." I opened it to the first page. "There are rules in here, Dante. Rules about how to treat people, rules about how to maintain an engine, rules about how to handle a load that is too heavy for the truck." I looked him in the eye. "I call them the King Protocols." I slid the book into the metal drawer that allowed items to be passed through. The guard checked it, then slid it to Dante's side. Dante picked it up. He held it like it was a holy relic. He ran his thumb over the cracked leather. "Why are you giving me this?" he asked. "Because you have time now," I said. I stood up. "You have 5 years, Dante. Maybe 3 with good behavior. That is a long time to sit in a library." I buttoned my jacket. "You can spend that time feeling sorry for yourself. You can spend it blaming Tiffany. You can spend it hating me." I paused. "Or you can read that book. You can learn how I built the chair you broke. You can learn what it actually means to be a king." Dante clutched the book to his chest. "Will you come back?" he asked, his voice small. I looked at the gray walls. I looked at the razor wire outside. "I will come back when you finish the book," I said. "And Dante?" "Yes, Dad. Do not just read it. Understand it. Because the next time you ask for the keys, I am not going to just hand them to you. You are going to have to build the truck yourself." I hung up the phone. I turned and walked away. I did not look back. But as the heavy steel door slammed shut behind me, I felt lighter. The debris was cleared. The foundation was exposed. And in the cold gray soil of a prison cell, I had just planted a seed. Now I had to wait and see if it would grow. The calendar on the wall of my office says it has been exactly 365 days since the federal agents walked my son out of this building. A year is a long time in the trucking business. In a year, a single 18-wheeler can travel 120,000 miles. It can cross this country 40 times. It can carry enough food to feed a city and enough medicine to save a hospital. In the last year, I have traveled a long distance too. Not on the highway, but in my soul. I stood by the window looking down at the yard. It was 5 in the afternoon. The sun was dipping low, casting long golden shadows across the asphalt. The yard was full of activity. Forklifts were buzzing back and forth like busy hornets. Mechanics were wiping grease from their hands. Drivers were doing their pre-trip inspections, checking tires and lights with the seriousness of pilots preparing for takeoff. It was a beautiful sight. It was the sight of a healthy, living thing. King Global Logistics was not just alive, it was thriving. We had posted our third quarter earnings yesterday. Profits were up 20%. The stock was trading at $45 a share, higher than it had ever been under Dante tenure. The Amazon contract was secure. We had just signed a new deal with a medical supply chain to distribute vaccines across the Southeast. But the numbers on the spreadsheet were not what made me smile. I walked over to my desk. It was clean, organized. On the corner of the desk sat a framed photograph. It was taken this morning. In the photo, I was standing on a podium in the company cafeteria. Next to me was Big Mike, who was wearing a suit that looked a little tight across his linebacker shoulders. And standing in front of us were 10 young men and women. They were holding oversized checks. They were the first recipients of the Coretta King Memorial Scholarship. I picked up the photo. I ran my thumb over the glass. For 40 years, I had plowed every cent of profit back into buying more trucks or building bigger warehouses. I thought that was how you built a legacy. You build things that people can see. You build things that take up space. But Coretta always said that the only thing that really lasts is what you build inside people. I had finally listened to her. We took the money that used to go to Tiffany branding consultants and her parties, and we put it into a trust fund. We made a promise to our drivers. If you drive for King Global, your children go to college. We pay for the tuition. We pay for the books. We pay for the chance that I never had and that Dante squandered. I looked at the face of one of the girls in the photo. Her name was Jasmine. Her father had been a mechanic in Bay 2 for 20 years. She was going to Georgia Tech to study civil engineering. She had cried when I handed her the check. Her father had cried too. He hugged me so hard I thought he cracked a rib. That hug was worth more than any bonus I had ever received. There was a knock on the door. "Come in," I said. Andre walked in. He was no longer the nervous kid in the cheap suit. He was wearing a tailored jacket, and he carried himself with the confidence of a man who knew his job inside and out. I had promoted him to director of operations last month. He was young, but he had the instincts of an old soul. "Mr. King," Andre said, "the fleet is fully dispatched for the night run. All systems are green, and I just got the report from the loading dock. We are running at 99% efficiency." I nodded. "Good work, Andre." He lingered in the doorway holding a tablet. "Is there something else, son?" I asked. Andre hesitated. "I got a call from the warden's secretary at Talladega," he said quietly. I stiffened. My heart did a slow, heavy thud in my chest. "Is he okay?" I asked. "He is fine," Andre said quickly. "Actually better than fine." The warden said Dante has finished his certification. He passed the exam to become a certified diesel mechanic. He got the highest score in the prison program. I sat back in my chair. A diesel mechanic. My son, the Harvard MBA who used to wear Italian loafers and refused to touch a wrench, had learned how to fix an engine. He sent a letter, Andre added. "It is in the mailroom. Do you want me to bring it up?" "No," I said. "I will get it later." Andre nodded. He understood. "You going to the balcony, Mr. King?" he asked. "I am Andre. It is that time of day." "Good night, sir. See you in the morning." "Good night, Andre." I waited until he left. Then I walked to the private elevator that opened onto the roof. The air up there was cool and smelled of exhaust and rain. I walked to the edge of the railing. Below me, the highway was a river of light. Red taillights flowing away, white headlights flowing toward me. I watched a King Global truck pull out of the gate. It was a brand new Kenworth shining silver and blue. On the side of the trailer in bold letters was the company motto. Not the one Dante had come up with, the original one. Moving America. One family at a time. I watched it merge into traffic. I thought about Dante sitting in his cell 3 hours away. I had visited him last week. He looked tired, but his eyes were clear. The shadows were gone. He showed me his hands. They were stained with grease. He had calluses on his palms. He told me about the engine he had rebuilt. He spoke with passion. He spoke about torque and compression ratios. He sounded like me 40 years ago. He did not ask for money. He did not ask for a lawyer. He asked me how the drivers were doing. He asked me if the company was safe. "Dad," he had said to me through the glass, "I read your book, The King Protocols." And I asked. "Rule number 4, he recited. "You cannot steer the truck if you are looking in the rear-view mirror." I smiled at the memory. He was learning. It was a hard school, a brutal school, but he was finally attending class. I took a deep breath of the evening air. I was alone on the roof, but I did not feel lonely. For years I had been surrounded by people who wanted something from me. Bankers, lawyers, Tiffany, even Dante. They wanted my money. They wanted my power. They wanted my signature. Now I was surrounded by people who respected me. I had earned the respect of the drivers because I stood up for them. I had earned the respect of the market because I told the truth. And slowly, painfully, I was earning the respect of my son by refusing to save him from himself. I looked at the city of Atlanta stretching out before me. I used to think that a legacy was a pile of cash you leave behind so your children never have to suffer. I thought it was a big house and a famous name. I was wrong. Money is not a legacy. Money is just fuel. If you put high-octane fuel in a broken engine, it just burns faster. Legacy is the engine itself. It is the way you build the machine. It is the integrity of the steel. It is the strength of the pistons. I had to let the tower fall. I had to let Dante crash. I had to watch my own heart break as I sent him away. But looking at the trucks moving down the highway, looking at the scholarship photo on my desk, and thinking about the grease on my son's hands, I knew I had made the right choice. The foundation was solid now. The rot was gone. The King family was not rich in the way Tiffany wanted to be rich. We did not have yachts. We did not have private jets. But we had something better. We had honor. And as I stood there watching the sun disappear behind the horizon, I realized something else. I was not just the guardian of the past anymore. I was the architect of the future. Dante would come home one day. He would walk out of those gates with grease under his fingernails and a logbook in his pocket. He would not be a prince who inherited a kingdom. he would be a man who knew how to build one. And I would be waiting for him, not with a check, but with a set of keys to a truck. "Start the engine, son," I would say. "We have a long haul ahead of us." I turned away from the railing. I walked back toward the elevator. My cane tapped a steady rhythm on the concrete. Click, clack, click, clack. It was the sound of work. It was the sound of purpose. It was the sound of a king who was finally at peace. Moral of the story. They say blood is thicker than water, but even blood can turn toxic if it is poisoned by greed. My son thought he could inherit my respect without inheriting my work ethic. He thought a title made him a king, but a crown is heavy, and if your neck is not strong enough, it will break you. I did not punish my son because I hate him. I punished him because I love him enough to teach him the one lesson money cannot buy: consequences. Legacy is not what you leave for people, it is what you leave in them. Sometimes you have to let the tower fall so you can rebuild it on solid ground. I hope this story reminded you that true love sometimes means saying no, and that the strongest foundations are built on truth, not gold. If you enjoyed this journey with the King family, please let me know in the comments which city you are tuning in from. Do not forget to like and subscribe for more stories about justice, resilience, and the hard road to redemption. See you in the next video. This journey taught me that the hardest duty of a father is not to shield his children from the storm, but to teach them how to sail through it. I spent years building a fortune for Dante, but I forgot to build his character. Money is just paper, but integrity is iron. When I let him fall, I did not do it to hurt him. I did it because rock bottom is the only foundation solid enough to build a real man. Do not fear the struggle, for it is the fire that forges the steel. A legacy without labor is just a loan that will eventually default. If you believe that respect must be earned and not inherited, please like this video and subscribe to the channel for more stories of justice. Tell me in the comments, would you have forgiven Dante or let him rot in prison? I want to hear your thoughts. Until next time, keep your engine running and your eyes on the road.